give me a second here. Okay, we'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Josh, will you take the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Ashley Bourne. Here. Don Bransford. Here. Don Cameron. Here. Nancy Cassidy. Helene Dillard.
Here.
Mike Gallo. Crystal Haley. Eric Holst. Here. Jeff Huckabee. Bryce Lumberg. Yes. Martha Montoya. Present. Frank Moeller. Here. Joy Sterling. Yes. Andy Thulin. Here. Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Josh. You've seen the minutes from the November 6th meeting. We need to have a motion to approve. Thank you, Andy. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. For the departmental update, Secretary Ross.
I'm going to race through this. So first of all, I know you'll all join me in remembering very fondly Ben Drake, who had just gone into hospice on the day of our last meeting and passed shortly thereafter. Great person, wonderful board member, and a very good friend of mine. And on a happier note, let's celebrate Bryce Lundberg and Lundberg Farms for the Leopold Award this year. Not to put too much pressure on the other producers at this table, but we've had a pretty good track record of having board members and board chairs receive that award, and it's not an easy thing to apply for, and there has to be real results behind it. But congratulations, Bryce, to you and your family. So there's something for everyone to strive for. Just very quickly, obviously the fires and the devastation of those fires will be with us for a long, long time, and so a lot of our time this month, and I have to give kudos to Kevin Masahara in particular, who's been able to be on every call, every day, holidays, Sundays, Saturdays. I've tried, but our staff so engaged with everyone volunteering to do those 24-hour shifts out at the Incident Command Center. And now we are working very closely with OES because the animal care situation for pets and livestock and backyard animals is of a magnitude, just to get our arms around it and to make sure there's enough people on a volunteer basis. I mean, folks came from all over the state with horse trailers filled with hay and feed and gathering panels, but there's still a lot of animals that are being housed at fairgrounds, and the National Guard's still doing feeding on site for the places where they are. There's a lot of animals to be captured, and of course, we want to do reunification as soon as we can. So that's been a big task, and I just can't say enough good stuff about all of our public employees, but I, of course, know the ones here at CDFA the best, and so they make a lot of things work. This is happening at the same time that our virulent Newcastle disease, we thought we were going to be on the down path of getting the disease load out of the basin, and we had an additional find in Riverside County 2 weeks ago in a pretty dangerous neighborhood, so law enforcement counseled us not to do our usual door-to-door, to do the surveillance thing, but we have great outreach programs through the churches and the feed stores and local animal groups to teach the community how to eradicate it themselves. We're reminded by Dr. Jones that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and so we're still trying to hit it hard to really lower the disease load and know that we'll still be there for several months to come. So all of our animal specialists are there, and we really didn't have a lot of excess people to help us with the animal care issues in the fire. Jenny's been very busy the last month or so because we are racing to completion of the Natural Working Landscapes report to the ARB. There have been a number of workshops. That report will be out by the end of the year. We'll set some pretty ambitious goals for the role of land management, healthy soils, wetlands, and forestry as part of the climate solution. At the Global Climate Action Summit, people touted over and over that the lands and the forests could actually produce 30% of the solutions. And so the adoption of the Natural Working Landscape Strategy and this report setting out some pretty ambitious goals, which will require climate change investment to go along with it, also creates a huge opportunity for agriculture to participate in that. We've been busy with ledge proposals. Rachel got them all over to the governor's office. Those will actually be approved by the incoming administration, but she gathered them all up and got them over there. We still are going through the BCP process for finance and preparing transition documents. And in fact, on very short notice, we were one of the first agencies to do a briefing for the policy team for Governor-elect Newsom yesterday, and it was a great conversation with people who are really digging in and want to understand a lot about agriculture generally, as well as the operations and policies here. We have had a romaine lettuce food safety outbreak, and this one it's to this extent that we have final details. It is out of California. We take this very, very seriously, especially because this appears to be a match to the genome sequencing of 2016 and 2017, which indicates there's something persistent in the environment. So we are very fortunate, again, staff of CDFA, Natalie and her crew, Steve Patton, we are determined to trace this back and to figure out what it is that we may have been missing, what else should we be doing. We have a great program with Leafy Green Marketing Agreement, but if we need to tear this program apart and put it back together with some new science, but really looking at what is it that's happening that we're not preventing these illnesses, or what is it that we could focus on as priorities for reducing the risk here. So that's taking an extraordinary amount of time, but we're determined to get to the bottom of it. We also have, this is a combination of our animal health division as well as our inspection services, because of the new antimicrobial use stewardship program. We're required to submit a report to the legislature next month on all the work that has been occurring over the last 2 years. And it is, thank you, Rachel, for reading the whole thing. I skimmed it and went, this is dense. And when I mean dense, I mean it's a lot of narrative, and there's a lot that's going on, and there's a lot to try to glean out of it. It is, we have very dedicated staff, and that will be followed up with annual reports. Our staff has made a commitment to do annual reports mid-year every year, just taking the data and doing more of an analysis of what the data is telling us in addition to all the guidelines that we'll be preparing. We've also updated our strategic plan. Seems weird to do it at the end of our administration, but Kevin and staff really drove that. And so that's available on our site if you're interested in that. And yesterday I walked into our conference room and Public Affairs had, it looked like 100 pages to me, spread out across the table, because I asked for a report of what have we done over the last 8 years. And I just walked in and said, that's a lot of pages. And Jay said, you guys have been very busy over the last 8 years. So I'm looking forward to having that available later this month. Joy, I know, is going to give us an update on some really good work that she's been doing on broadband. Thank you for that. Yesterday, Jenny represented us at it was the final meeting of what we call the SB 1383 working group, which was the group that was established to lay out ongoing strategies and identify research gaps or technology gaps for our methane reduction program, short-lived climate pollutants. And she reports that it was a very good meeting. I had a chance to get on the phone with all of the co-chairs of the 3 working groups in advance of that. And I think it's been a very broad-based, stakeholder-driven process with a lot of good input. We also had a chance to meet with representatives of the environmental justice community last week, making sure that all voices are at this table and that all viewpoints were included in this report. So I think it's very, very, very well done. We have been running a pilot program on how can we do more work at the point of origin to help our bee friends get into the state for the world's largest pollinator project every year. And we did this, my friend and colleague, the commissioner for North Dakota, which has a lot of beehives, suggested a pilot program. He would have host our people going there to just walk them through the processes that we're looking at, and specifically looking at indoor warehousing, which is becoming pretty routine for the Northwest and the upper Midwest in particular, and should bring us cleaner hives as far as insect pressure and disease pressure. So we had a team up there for a week in mid-November. They thought it was pretty cold, and I said it was 30s and 20s. You don't know what cold is. Even with wind chill, that's not cold. And so we will be hosting their apiary specialist and the commissioner here to shadow us at our border stations to truly understand what our process is. But this is just something that our staff has really gone above and beyond to figure out how do we provide that customer service and how do we help get beehives into the state as we need them. It was a good pilot. We have some ideas from what we learned and what we want to do next year and try to expand that pilot, see if we can't really make that work. Keep the price of those beehives down for you. Yeah, I know. There's just 3 more things I want to report on. One is that our cannabis program, you know, that the numbers have been solid, but not what people were expecting. And then was that in August, Rachel, that it came to our attention that local governments were not going to be able to get their CEQA work done in time to accommodate people who have a temporary license to be able to get their annual license? Bottom line is the legislature passed a provision for us to have provisional licenses. And we communicated to the industry, if you don't have your application in for a temporary license by about December 1st, physically we won't be able to issue temporary licenses. I am pleased to report it has worked. We went from about 3,000 solid numbers to, over the weekend, it jumped to over 8,000 applications. Now, we can trace back, there's probably about 4,000 of those that will be easier to deal with than others, but I'm just saying, it's like, it works for everybody, right? Like, I got my house decorated because I wanted to host you all last night. Deadlines work. Deadlines work. December 1st was communicated and it worked. So everyone at the division, including the division director, are running the programs to be able to process all of this. So it's a big, big, big load. Then I want to report on a week ago, the dairy sector hosted their first ever Dairy Sustainability Summit. Our own Ashley Gorin was a speaker there. Jenny was a speaker there. I got to do a little welcome and praise the dairy sector for doing the summit. It was well attended. Organizers were hopeful there'd be a couple hundred people on the first year of the summit, and they had over 600. Dairy families, all the significant players in the dairy sector. People were really, they were excited, and they really had a chance to reflect together on all the work that they've done, how they've really stepped up on dairy digesters and the methane reduction programs. And this week, in fact, tonight, the Almond Board is in town. Their theme is around sustainability and their innovation agenda. And I think it could be time, and maybe this board could help lead it, but I think it's time. We saw this in Denver. Donna and I were on a program in Denver at what had once started as the Dairy Innovation Sustainability Conference, and it's now morphed into an agricultural sustainability conference. If California can't host an agricultural sustainability conference about the good work that's happening here, I don't think they should do it in Denver, Colorado either. So I'm just thinking that all the good work that you did around an important topic like groundwater recharge, and all of the ways that has worked across cabinet to really inspire real action to make this a real accomplishment, I think that could be something, that or broadband, right, Joy? And I think broadband is a part of sustainability, so to say. So it's been a great month. It's been a great 8 years. It's been a great ride. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Ross, and thank you for hosting us last night. Really enjoyable evening. Yes. Go ahead, Nancy. Microphone.
My first question is the bee population rebounding?
Yeah, it's been holding very, very steady, and we are seeing healthier bees come in, but it is that decline happened over time and it will take time to come back, but it's not in a worse
fall.
situation. There's always more work that we can do, but a lot of it is education, working with the producers themselves. But I also think that it's important for us to pay attention to how do we improve the health and numbers of our native pollinator population as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, at the Dairy Sustainability Summit,
Yep.
was there conversation about the seaweed additive feed type thing?
So I don't know that, I think it probably was discussed at the summit, but it was clearly a part of the discussions as alternatives because of the enteric fermentation issues. And so there was a work group looking at, and Jenny would be a good person because she heard everything in person yesterday, but that clearly we have several dairies that are doing pilot programs on this. So it's something that's definitely being evaluated, and trials are being run for animal health and productivity and nutrition and all those things that go with it.
Great, thank you. And then my last question is about the romaine problem. It seemed unusual or unexpected that we didn't get news about the tracking as early in the outbreak as I thought we might. And I just wondered, is that typical or?
It is typical because CDC and FDA, Department of Public Health, but CDC and FDA run all the epi tests on this, and then it takes a lot of work to do the sequencing and the matches and the interviews. I mean, it's pretty amazing. They go back and interview people for their illnesses and to recall what they ate and try to narrow that down. And so that's part of the frustrating process, is just that in and of itself doesn't happen immediately. So that part of the traceback takes time.
Complicated. And then was there any distinction between the conventional and the organic crop?
No, the traceback is not to the point of that kind of precision to know that at this time. Our goal is always to be as clear as we can be as a way to inform us of how do we go back to our leafy green program, which is a good program, and continuously improve that with what we've learned from these kinds of outbreaks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Yep.
Can you explain what you do in the ledge proposal review? Explain that, and I'm just wondering what that process is. and what you
So for us at CDFA, our role is primarily looking at where there's a need for cleanup, clarification in the code, maybe some bills that passed a couple of years ago. We identify parts of the code that are just completely antiquated and need to be updated. So it's very much internal to our statutes and our work here. We did just last week host meetings with a number of stakeholder groups just to hear what's on their horizon and some of the things that they'll be working on. That's also important to be able to share with the governor's office and the incoming governor as well. So our work is very internal, driven by, our barriers where we're stumbling on some antiquated language or whatever.
But if the issue's big enough, is it worth bringing to the board to make a recommendation, or does that not carry as much weight?
I think it would be. This is a very internal process, much as our BCPs are. But when we identify significant issues that could be cross-cutting, because a lot of our issues are not just housed within our statute. And those are clearly the kinds of issues that should come to this board for a recommendation to the governor. And I will say the collaboration that has occurred across cabinet from day one in this administration has helped us accomplish a lot. So I'm very hopeful, and I'm sure that it will, with good people and in all places, and not just at the leadership. This has to happen program to program, and build that kind of trusting relationship that we all know we get to better decisions working together. Yeah.
Karen, thank you for the detailed report, and thank you for 8 years of amazing, amazing work for California food and ag for the people of California who consume the food that we grow and the products we produce. And thank you for your inclusiveness, your cooperative spirit, the innovation that you have adopted and continue to adopt, and the results that you and your team have gotten for this administration and for the people of California. I'm so proud of what you have accomplished and the work you've done.
So because they're here, Jenny and Rachel should stand up too. All my staff should stand up because it doesn't just happen. You know that. All CDFA staff. Come on. Oh, don't be modest now. Come on.
Thank you, Bryce. Well said, and really great support. Thank you, Karen, for all you've done, and hope to continue. And to the staff, it doesn't happen without you, so we know that. I've learned that very well. Okay, we're gonna shift gears, and we're gonna start with our first presentation on blockchain for food. We have Raja Rama. Come on, I knew I was gonna ruin that. Ramachandran is the CEO with Ripe.io, a company that considers itself as a blockchain for food. Ripe.io offers solutions to food problems that involve data transparency while also providing answers to many consumers' questions. Raja has a background in finance and Forex trading and is fond of using financial technology, cloud-based systems, machine learning, and blockchain to help solve problems around food on a global scale. So welcome.
Well, thank you. I want to thank Josh for somehow finding us, and the press is good. So no, on behalf of my company and I, we're definitely honored to speak and present today. You know, what I'll try to do is briefly go over this complicated topic of blockchain and what does it mean, particularly the impacts for food, agricultural, not only through California, but actually through the states and globally. You know, we've been at it for a couple of years. We have a number of pilots. And we'll talk to you a little bit about our real-life experiences with farmers, distributors, packers, regulatory agencies, all the way up to retail. You know, I thought maybe just a quick 101. I promise no tests. So, you know, we'll talk a little bit. Like people ask, what is blockchain? It really is just another form of database. And think of it as sort of like, imagine all of you writing information down right now. The issue is, if you shared it with everybody and had an ability to go ahead and create a consensus that this is a record of truth, so if Karen states something and Don confirms it, or Bryce brings another, you know, form to it and says this is the truth, that's what blockchains do. That's it. There's really not much more than that. And so as far as the technology is concerned, these are created on ledgers. They're analogous to things like spreadsheets and tabs in a spreadsheet. And so the idea is that you can have a public style blockchain, which is what you've probably heard about Bitcoin. And that means that there basically is no centralized party that helps manage transactions. So right now, an example of that is like Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin doesn't involve Visa or a bank to actually, you know, manage the transfer of a digital asset like a coin. And so you hear a lot about that. The technology can be used in private corporations or enterprises where you can take the same technology but do it without coins. And so things like, if you look at, right, farm registries, crop information, farm equipment, all these types of things can be placed on a ledger. And as a result of that, the technology allows it to be sealed cryptographically, and you get a permanent record. And so in that sense, you actually have a statement of fact. The key about making it more valid is making sure that another ledger, another party, or another group to the transaction agrees with that. The more that you get consensus, the stronger the record. And it's impenetrable in a sense. And so blockchains really allow for a whole series of transaction management, records management, and so on. And so that in of itself is probably plenty. The technology groups can get into it, but in essence, it allows you to use web, mobile, any kind of technology to interact with it. So you can see information that's actually on the blockchain. So why blockchain? I would say that the number one reason is this: a shared single trusted view. And the point of that is that I come from the banking sector and the trading, and one of the bigger problems there is that when you'd be surprised, when you do a trade for a bond or a stock, it goes through probably 5 different reconciliations. It's about a $22 billion problem in the financial industry, and so that happens everywhere. If you contract between a farmer, and a buyer or a distributor, people are looking at that transaction to figure out, is it true, what's missing, does someone fat finger in, so on. And so blockchains really help with that piece of it. The other, and this is more sophisticated, this notion about track and trace. I'll get into that in a little bit because everybody wants to know, but it's less technology as opposed to collaboration, and I'll talk to you about that in a sec. Certainly can preserve data ownership. It can definitely we can tackle problems like food waste, regulatory compliance, and really it shows transparency. And so transparency is a two-edged sword, right? I think that there are a lot of people that don't want it. On the other hand, it's an important dimension so that you can actually understand the quality of your food, the safety of your food, the improvement of supply chain operations, and so on. So McKinsey did a study where they showcased a number of different verticals that are actually using blockchain. And interestingly enough, agricultural supply and applications like food safety came up quite high in terms of the applicability of that technology. And so, as you can't see it so clearly, but you can see that mining, supply chain, financial, insurance, healthcare, music, legal, they're all testing it. And so we're in a very big phase for at least another year or two where people really get a determination to find out whether this is helpful or not. So ag, I think, fits largely because it is so decentralized. There's no center of gravity. Just like there is in banking or insurance, you've got a central bank or a state regulator that really manages a transaction. And so as a result, there's really no good empowerment. There's no strong sense of once a farmer, lets go through harvest, their produce, they have no idea what happens to that, quite frankly. So they want to get closer to the customer, and the consumer wants to know more about the farming practice and what's happening to their food. So these are some of the activities and pilots that are actually going on today. We do a lot of this. Supply chain intelligence. 3 of our pilots have been totally focused on sustainability, and I'll explain. Certainly food quality is an area that we really try to do. We put flavor profiles on the blockchain as a result of capturing tons of information from the farm in the trucks, actually at the store. Food safety, obviously front and center because of the romaine and other things. Traceability is an important consideration. Commodity management. Louis Dreyfus and Bunge and a number of large commodity players are trading grain on blockchains. Marketplaces are slowly emerging. People want to know, how can I pay my farmers quicker and settle? And then, of course, this whole notion of what's happening in the field. Sensors, a whole series of drones. There's all sorts of things that provide data. And then even authenticity, which is a very tricky topic. But in essence, how do I assure the origination of a good? So maybe a little bit about us. So I think we began with, in the financial industry where my partner and I came from, and we now have a team of agronomists, farmers, supply chain specialists, operations folks. But our core beginning was to look at what exactly, comprised the food system. It's this amazing sort of disparate set of activities that are loosely connected, but somehow your food gets to you pretty much every day, and generally without consequence. But when it does happen, it's a lightning strike, and, it's a bit of a problem. And so we felt like we started to evaluate, is blockchain actually the right technology for all of this? Because you can use databases and other things so that you can figure things out. And so when you look at food, it's really a language. It is really a composition of chemistry, of identifiers, of nomenclature that actually identify what's actually happening in that food. And so as a result, we have taken an approach where we capture what we call the digital twin of the food. It tells you, anything specific about that food, the actors or the people that are involved, and then what happens, like in the activity. So for example, we've been doing a lot of work on tomatoes. We have something like 240 different data elements describing a tomato. That'll never get to a consumer, but we know more about the tomatoes than you could possibly imagine. And it's really difficult for me because I don't eat raw tomatoes, so I just look at the, the data. And then also blockchains, what's important is preserving the proprietary nature of the data. So our blockchain in particular is set up a little this way, where effectively we've broken up the world into two forms of data categories. Number one is operational data. This is in a private network or a network of an ecosystem. This is information that all the participants in that blockchain can use freely, say temperature information and so on. Restricted data is proprietary to the ledger of an enterprise or a farmer or a distributor or whatever it might be. And so as a function of that, when it goes on the blockchain, you can see the green tabs only show two entities that are allowed to see that information, whereas the orange allows it to be all. So our blockchain's built with kind of real life conditions in mind. And then I'll talk through a couple of use cases. We have many, actually, we're actually going through. We've been spending time for, like this summer, with the Dairy Farmers of America. And what we did is we worked through them through an accelerator program in Kansas City called the Sprint Accelerator. And so they were a backer of it, and so we had time to spend with them to look at, well, they wanted to understand what's the impact for blockchain for their membership base. And we zoned in on sustainability. And the thesis was, if you provide sustainability information all the way to the consumer, does that increase like institutional sales? So they wanted to know, is there economic uplift for their farmer base if you use the content that they already have? And so we spent a lot of time designing and understanding the flow, of dairy product, literally from the inception of cow all the way to the point of, we had 3 different use cases. We imagined users at, say, Starbucks, when they look at, packages of milk behind the counter or the supply chain manager. We had McDonald's, where we put a label on a Happy Meal milk so that we can understand what a low information consumer, like meaning they're very busy, would they even pay attention to such a thing? And then Roundy's, which is a grocery store up in the Midwest. And so the idea was to understand, if we fed this information to the consumer, what's the impact? Would they have lift? Would they buy more? We're ongoing right now. We finished phase 1. And so what this is just a QR code, the scribble in the square, that basically you scan it. Actually, if you have a scanner, you can go ahead and put it up, and it'll take you to a website that shows you where that milk came from the day, who's the farming base, what was the locality, and so on. And so the sustainability model that was employed is that they've spent probably about 1.5 years defining like an index based upon carbon footprint, animal welfare, labor practices, business practices, water management, and so on. And so as a result of that, they're kind of going through to figure out what happens when they start exposing it not only to their farmer base, but also the consumer base. So we have tons of information about sustainability that can actually be shared, not only within their ecosystem, but others. So we're continuing to do a lot of work here. And in fact, we're about to begin an entire project with the National Pork Board to do the same around sustainability of pork, but also feed traceability. In other words, preventing PED and swine flu and so on, so we can track it from Chinese producers all the way through to farms, so that we can help understand what the traceability of these items are, and ideally preventability. So anyway, sustainability and quality are a real strong theme of what we do. We're working with a company called Sweetgreen. This is our first real pilot, and we're like in year 2 right now. And so Sweetgreen's a fast-growing table salad restaurant. They just raised a ton of money, and they're now called a unicorn, which is where you break the $1 billion mark. So it's been interesting working with them because in the end, they really help define the need for their transparency and how it is that they manage their supply chain. And so it's a fast-growing restaurant, but it is a microcosm of what's happening throughout the country. So it really began with this. So blockchains, the important part is you have to define, the asset that you're putting together. So in this case, it really was, tell us about the farm. We got tons of information about the farm that we get from the farmer. And the reason they would give us this is twofold. Number one, once they put the information in, it goes to multiple sources, regulators, distributors, and so on. The second is that if they believe that they're going to preserve or increase their price points or increase their own market share within the sales of these things, they believe that, and they want to participate. We get things like seed information, once it's planted into a nursery, once it's transplanted into a field, understanding all of the different, if it's pesticide, is it organic, and understanding the distinction, planting type, all the way through harvest, pickup, and then ultimately to the consumer. And so all of this is what we call a food bundle. That's that digital twin that I talked about before, and it allows us to really understand the representation of how something was grown all the way through its life cycle into consumption. And so it began with that, and so what does this look like in real life? It looks like this. We've created dashboards so that the supply chain manager can actually see what's happening in real time. So the way this is an older version, but at least it'll give you some ideas. So it tells you a lot about the product. How much, when was it harvested? So in other words, everything that you can about produce details. So we simplified it so people could see these things. Because we track sensor information and a ton of information about the soil, and all the way through transport, ultimately actually getting a chemistry reading at the point of chopping it up on a table, you can actually figure out flavor profiles. And so it tells you, is that seed ultimately flourishing into the sweetness that the farmer knows in his head, but now you have, you have actually quantitative evidence. The other part is farm level details. It tells you, we can put anything about the farm that you want. In this case, Sweetgreen has their own ethos score. So they have a way, and this is what's called smart contracts, bad term, but all it is a checklist of items that fulfill an objective or an outcome. So in this case, the ethos score was there to understand how it is that they're fulfilling sustainability, labor practices, and so on. It's a way for them to capture it. And we try to get consensus around it. And then a lot of people want to know about traceability. So in that sense, once you start putting together the farm to their ultimate buyer, you can get all this information. And so much of it has to do with collaboration. Right now, this is a closed environment, meaning we work very closely with Sweetgreen and their farmers. And so in that sense, it's a motivated group. When you go beyond that, that's where challenges occur. And you've probably heard about IBM's Food Trust and Walmart, where they're trying to employ the same. Using mandates can sometimes be useful. On the other hand, I've heard a lot of things from the Western growers, for example, and a number of distribution companies where they're really worried about, all of a sudden, is this a Walmart system? And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing at all. It's just that that's a good point of really breaking open the conversation. So we want to be able to support that. And then things like consumer. In other words, all of this information can be translated and converted into really useful things for the consumer. So if they want to know, tell me what's in my salad, tell me about the farmer, where did it come from, is it fresh? All of that can be employed in mobile and clicks as you're sitting there eating your salad. So for the future, some of the things that we're working on, right now, we've been working with General Electric, and they have an RFID tag where what they've done with it is that they've basically put it against milk cartons, and what they found is that when bacteria forms, it creates an electrical charge. Well, the RFID tag picks it up. So you get early detection of spoilage. And so we want to be able to go ahead and manage it through a distribution system to showcase actually food safety issues at the point of origin, which is where the CDC and everyone else is having real challenges. Now, this is way in the future. I mean, this is something that we're starting to work on. But the issue is that you get real data, from the localized sites, whether it's at a grocery store shelf or wherever it might be. And what it is, it's meant to match up with the entirety of the activities from farmer all the way through the distribution system, trucking, cold chain storage, down to there. So it allows us to really capture multiple forms of data, consolidate it in a way that could be useful. And quite frankly, we would open this up to any regulator or CDC so they have a look through. So at least at the early stages, you might be able to see what's going on. For the pork board, this is kind of how we work. In general, we create a map of sort of the entire ecosystem so that we can break down really key activities, what the players are, what the data categories could be, so that we can actually chunk up. If we're going to do something on sustainability, it could be that it's just this part of the equation. If it's around feed traceability, the distribution center and the packer are going to have to be really, the farms will have to be a piece of it. If it's around taste, we'll have to understand what happens after the processing and so on. And so can we factor it all in? So this is a way that we always work within any ecosystem that we go through. I know I've gone through this really quickly, but I figured I'd just open up for questions. The way we see the world, sort of evolving over the next several years is that, today you're seeing a couple of blockchains that are really focused on whether it's food safety, a sense of traceability. That software is already available. I think the key is to figure out how do you preserve the proprietary nature of a farmer's information so they get uplift and they can participate in a meaningful way without feeling like, if I give this information to large food entities, am I going to just get further commoditized for things that I believe are really valuable? So what I think will happen is, and the way we work it is that, that's why that operational versus private is very, very important or restricted, because it allows for the integrity, of potential monetization in the future. So we think that right now, there's a bit of a, how much food data can you actually, determine? And how do you able to pick that up? And so we're creating what we call food libraries, basically a definition of any food type, beyond what the USDA may have, but so that it'll become available to the public, other stakeholders that may want to utilize the blockchain. The second part is integrated stakeholders. It's still very fragmented. You have a couple of consortiums. You certainly have us and a couple of other blockchains that are working in smaller ecosystems to make this happen. And, in the end, reductions in food value chain inefficiency is a big economic outcome. And so we're seeing that, supported. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, you'll actually see more foundational blockchains that conduct a series of tracking and tracing and sustainability output. And in the long run, you'll see this domain connect to other domains, whether it's insurance, financial transactions, regulatory, so that they're not inherent in part of the actual transaction set, but actually allow you to integrate and have better knowledge so that you can do better risk mitigation, better financial management, better regulatory management and compliance. So I think that's kind of where we are today. And what I'll do is I'll kind of put an end at this point, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of questions.
Yeah. Sorry, I know we packed a lot in there, but I figured I got 30 minutes. What the heck?
I got real clear. Yeah, that was great.
Yes, sir.
Joy, go ahead.
What is your experience with the QR codes? Are consumers using them? Are people looking at it?
I'll take that in 2 steps. QR codes are nominally useful, right? They have click-through rates of anywhere from, single digits to maybe teens. And so, the issue comes down to what is embedded in that QR code. Is there a coupon? Is there an incentive? Whatever it might be. So in that sense, you may have, well above standard deviations and lower than that. For ours, because it was so unique, the click-through rates are almost 100%. And so that's not real, because in the end, it was a test that was very much, designed for maximum participation. So, we don't go directly to the consumer. We don't know what the consumer really wants. Ours is a B2B solution. We look to restaurants, grocery stores, consumer products, good companies to figure it out. I mean, I've spoken to Coke, Pepsi, Campbell's, Nestle, Mars, whatever. And it's ironic, they ask me, in our company, well, what's the consumer going to react to? I'm like, that's your job. You have billions of dollars that you're supposed to understand, what the odd wallet customer does. So I think that it's an interesting time, because if brands haven't figured that out, if all of a sudden they have a ton of information, how are they going to assemble a story? I think that for consumers, back to your QR code, I think that, traceability isn't enough to sustain why it is that you're going to try to get this information. I think it's the personalization of food, ultimately, that you take advantage of the digital component rather than the analog one. And I think that's where things like QR codes become useful.
Raj, I wanted to follow up on that too. Well, my question is on QR codes where, you know, you're talking about milk coming from one dairy. I mean, many times, especially with a large buyer, you're getting milk that's commingled
Sure.
from several dairies, and you put one QR code on that shows it. I mean, how do you handle that?
So the way we design that particular pilot is that we work with one processor in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. And because they have, so what happens is a DFA, Dairy Farmers, has their own transactive database and logistics. The processor has one, and then there's one on sustainability. We merged all those three into one blockchain-based set of data. And so what you have for the consumer is that you're right, you'll never get it down to the cow or so on. But what we do have is a tracking of the daily delivery, you know, of the trucks that commingle all of that. And so we have logs of that day's trucker that picks up in the particular 100-mile region. And so that is what gets shown to the consumer, is that these farms participated in the formation of this milk, and it came from within 100 miles. That was really important because local community, sort of like folks, really connect with their local farmers. They want to know and support that business. And as a result, that's where they're able to see all of that. So no, I mean, when it comes to commingled, and particularly there's all these questions about romaine lettuce, right? That's a hard thing to do, unless you can actually track it to the row. You know, there are companies like Marcon, for example, that can do that, but nobody called them. And so it's this lack of, that's why I said that that food supply chain, that diagram we showed, it's highly disconnected. It needs to be more connected so that you get a better sense of outcome.
So you say that it would have great usefulness on the regulatory and compliance level. So that would mean working with, for example, the state. Have you done any work in that area?
So I used to belong to, in my financial days, there's a company called R3. And it's the largest banking consortium that's formed around blockchain and distributed ledger technology. So in our early days, we invited and spent time with financial regulators. I sat in front of the SEC, the CFTC, NASD, and so on, so that we could talk through what exactly is being done. I think the feedback, if I could summarize, was number one, they don't have the resources to necessarily understand what's going on, but they want transparency. That was the number one, piece of it. Two, they already have legislative means in which they can enforce, so it wasn't about that. And so therefore, their mantra is do no harm. And the last part is, grow as these things, as they continue to participate. So from our perspective, we haven't done anything specific with a regulator yet, but we'll end up creating effectively a see-through so that you can actually, witness what's going on and understand what's happening. Because I think in the end, I think it's important for the regulators to at least have some level of transparency. And I think for the most part, what we've seen with regulations is that for these kind of network technologies, it's not like that they want to necessarily enforce or use it against you, but rather, what are the trends, where are the risk points, what are manageable, what actually has to be embedded as a discussion around things like legislation and so on, right? And so it's that type of engagement that, that we haven't put together yet, but that's one of the objectives for next year.
Have met you a couple times in a couple events. So I'm going to ask a philosophical question on whether you have created a model. 95% of our farmers are not large farmers, and adoption of technology and cost of technology is a major issue, and I'm hearing it throughout the ground. At what point in the curve do you see 1 year, 10 years, 20 years that will balance out, where we didn't used to have smartphones, but now everybody has smartphones, right? When would you, if there's a model, and I appreciate that you come from the banking industry, when would you see that curve turning around and switching? And again, it's We will not hold you to it, but I just want to hear that thinking, philosophical thinking.
All right, good. Because if that's the case, I need to leave right now, so. So maybe I can speak from the company's perspective and our strategy for that. In the end, we're going to keep this free for farmers. I think that, with that, like, that's a nominal, component. I don't think that incents farmers really to get on board. I think that if they've got transparent channels of delivery, I think that's interesting. If they have improvements in, say, food waste and yield, that's another. If they can reduce the risk, of censure or some, getting closed out just because of food. So all of these things motivate them, right? So the problem is what you pointed out, which is, getting all of that data and getting it on a persistent basis. So, so one of the things that we're doing and why we're working with coalitions or co-ops like dairy farmers, they already have a lot of that data. So they have inherent data about the farm. They have transaction information. They've got, veterinarian records, regulatory records, sustainability information, soil, and on and on and on. So as a result, that actually can populate the blockchain so that if they join, we could set up programs with the DFA. So it goes out to their member base, and in a way, they actually will have a populated field that they can go through. So it simplifies a little bit about initializing or putting in new information to get there. So it gets them on board rather quickly. So we're about to work with the third largest distribution company in the United States for food service, and that's a similar kind of activity that we're going through. National Pork Board represents the same. So in essence, we're working with agencies that serve the farm base, that have the data, but also have the connection points into the retail side so that you can combine all this together. So I think that's kind of our tactic and our strategy. We'll see if it works, but I think that helps. In the end, they have to have a compelling reason to persist and remain on the system.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. My question is, at least initially, this seems to be the food companies would be more interested than growers. And if I could set my price, and then as you monetize my practices, and I would get some upward bump on that, that would benefit me or other growers. And you have large corporations that are very interested in this data, because then they can just drill down exactly to what my cost of production is. They know it anyway without this, but we need help on the grower side on monetizing practices to benefit what we're doing, and to acknowledge those cultural practices that we're doing that enhances that food. And you're looking at organic prices, and they're ratcheting down, and so I worry about what I see, because the fact that we can't set price, we're a price taker. I don't know if we benefit or we get squished by this. Whoever, thank you.
Yeah, so that's a market dynamics question. A couple of things. Number one, I think for most of the farmers that we've talked to, inherently have a sense of what the value of what they create, but they don't have a sense of the digital value of what they create. So what's being asked for now is digital content. And, what I've heard from trade associations and farmers and all of it is that they need to understand what the implications of that are. So that's the first thing. Second, which is why we put together a restricted set of ledgers, is so that you can determine who you want to share this with. If Campbell's or Walmart or Costco or whomever is asking for harvest information, aspiration rates off of berries, and on, you have to ask yourself the question, like, well, if I'm giving you all this, what do I get for it? I don't think there's enough experience yet for anybody to really understand it. I think corporations are asking, because it's really, I mean, it's to their benefit. But I don't think that the farmer base has really thought through what's actually that value. Now, the third is that when you create this food bundle that we talked about, that in and of itself, you know, can create a pricing structure within it, and like an intrinsic one. So, for example, we're doing a project in Australia where we're tracking beef, and we're just about to begin, so that Australian beef can be sent with confidence into China. And as a result, that entire basis from birth all the way through consumption at the retail, we've actually got pricing levels for each of the activity from calving up to the 15 to 18 months before they, you know, they ultimately go through processing, you know, all the way through the packer as it gets cut up into 200 pieces, goes to, so we actually have pricing for each of those levels. Now, when we show that digitally, it's kind of interesting, you know, because in the end, you know, what happens is you have a market price, which is already set by a market that's in a steady state, versus a new digital state where all of a sudden, you know, certain values are enhanced that you just didn't know about in the forward. So back to your point, I think that, you know, we're far from it, but when you get a digital representation of all of the activities in the workflow and the inputs, you can actually start to, you know, break down what those are and enable potentially the farmer to make money from that. Now, that's not in the cards today. I think that that's something that, you know, we're definitely focused on. I think our answer to that is, you know, open up the appropriate channels. So in other words, if somebody wants transparency, well, you know, make sure that they get paid for it. And so since we're in very small pilots, that's easy. On scale, you know, for mass production, that's a different equation. And so, you know, it's to be seen how this all works out. And also there's trust. That's fundamentally behind all of this. You look at like Bolthouse Farms, right? When they go out by Campbell's, this is a sort of, you know, fresh product, right? But if it goes into an environment and a culture and a system that doesn't embrace kind of a different kind of food supply chain operation, you know, it falls out. And so what is that? Where's the farmer left? So these are all unanswered questions that I think are coming up.
Can you, California probably has the most highly regulated agricultural environment in the world. Can you monetize that?
Well, I mean, it comes back
you know, and compare that to any other state or any other country, because it's huge. And what I see in one of my commodities is, you know, there are sustainability programs, but they don't come here because of the pricing. And we have the safest food in the world. So you'd think, why aren't they coming here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, part of it is you already have an existing business model and a market environment of purchasing and so on that probably in the long run could probably be disrupted. I don't think it happens anytime soon, but I think that the value of an input, whether it's regulations or organic, you know, or particularly growing, IPM, whatever, those elements are somewhat taken into account, but it really depends on the buyer. I think that, no, I mean, first it has to be proven that regulations actually create more value, right? And that's for any input or any kind of component into a market price. And then after that, once that's shown, then you have transparent models in a blockchain version that you can see, you know, why a price taker is actually asking for more. Now, whether you do that through like industry buying groups and so on, or co-ops, that might be the answer. I don't know yet. But these are issues that haven't been really, you know, like there's a lot of discussion about it, but there's no evidence about what consumers are really going to do with so-called transparency.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. I have a question. So when you look at the evolution of food safety audits and sustainability audits that growers are going through, it's every retailer, every company wants a different system, and it's led to a lot of redundancy, a lot of paperwork, and, you know, a lot of hours of work. Do you see the same thing evolving with this? Well, if there's competitors that you have, are you going to share information? Or if a retailer picks your company over another one, is it going to lead to the same kind of redundancy?
Yeah, I would use the analogy of like cell phones, right? In other words, you can be anywhere on the planet, make a call, and you'll be enabled to have that call. everything in the background between telecom carriers, the business model conflicts, revenue splits, et cetera, will be managed. So right now, we're working on we've already worked on our technology to be interoperable with any other blockchain platform. So IBM's, for example, there's a platform called Ethereum. R3 has one. There's a number of them. So our digital object will talk to these systems. We got a lot of testing to do, but yeah, the last thing we want is someone to, like, a big company to go, do I need to select a blockchain? You should just join a network and be able to go have seamless. So the idea is to create a better map of the country through interconnectivity.
Great. Helene, real quick.
Real quick question.
We really have to.
When you think about what happened with the romaine lettuce, basically on NBC, they told everybody to throw all your lettuce out of your refrigerator.
Everything.
CDC. So what would blockchain result in that would be different? Would they be able to say, only throw it out if you bought it in this state or that? I mean, that was like national.
Yeah. And also, you need to know the last mile. That's the hard part.
The last
Yeah, so if you have last mile information, then you can actually get to matching it with the label, because even with the label, it's commingled and so on. So that's really the trick, and that's not blockchain really. It's collaboration.
Okay.
I think I've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you.
No, really interesting, and thank you for the presentation. We really appreciate it. We're going to move on to institutional purchasing. Paula Daniels, Center for Good Food Purchasing. Welcome, Paula. Paula Daniels is the co-founder, chief of What's Next, and chair of the board for the Center for Good Food Purchasing, founded in July of 2015 as a national spinoff from the Los Angeles Food Policy Council, which Paula founded in 2011. Paul is an experienced private sector attorney who transitioned, what's that?
Sorry, he's watching me trying to figure out where my presentation is.
Transitioned to public policy and served in several senior level positions as a government official, including senior advisor, Mayor Villaraigosa of Los Angeles, and positions with the California Water Commission and the California Coastal Commission, among others. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I think while they're finding my presentation, I will just want to take this moment to also thank Secretary Ross for a tremendous 8 years here. I started working in food policy. I had been involved in water policy and served on the Bay Delta Authority Board as well. Some of you may remember that once an infamous institution, but I started getting involved in food policy in about 2009 or so, and shortly thereafter, Secretary Ross came on board, and it was really tremendous to have a strong communication between Sacramento and the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the City of Los Angeles as we were shaping this idea for the things that we could do as a city, as a large municipal area, to communicate better with our rural agricultural economies, mostly through developing a more robust economic communication. And that was the goal behind pulling our Food Policy Council together. We created a program called the Good Food Purchasing Program. It's clunky, it's not wonderful, but it says what it does. And then so, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but eventually was adopted in 2012 by the City of Los Angeles and LA Unified School District. And that moment in time was just awarded an international award by the World Future Council, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, and IFOAM Organics International. So I was in Rome on World Food Day in October to receive a Future Policy Award for scaling up agroecology. And that's for this program that I'm going to talk to you about. Thank you. It was one of 8. They examined quite a few policies from around the world, and it was one of 8 that was recognized, the only one from the United States. So we're really pleased that we were able to get that international recognition, and they're hoping to take that on to the C40, if you all are familiar with that. Next. So the Center for Good Food Purchasing is only 3 years old, but again, we started in Los Angeles in 2012. And because there was what we were sensing as national interest in this program, we decided to spin it off in 2015 and created the Center for Good Food Purchasing. Again, a clunky but practical name. This is what we do. It's about good food purchasing. So let's see, am I doing this right? Yeah, okay, I got it. So why did we want to do it? I mean, we took a look when we were starting the LA Food Policy Council back in 2009, 2010. There were a number of programs we wanted to address. Among them was healthy food access. Among them was, building out the supply chains, and among them was how we could aggregate the power of institutions, the purchasing power of institutions, to start communicating, many of the values that I'll talk to you about in a second, I think that we all share. And we looked at the aggregate power of institutional food service. This is nationally, it's about 120 billion. So you can imagine if in an aggregate way, all of these institutions were directing their purchasing toward values like supporting local economies and sustainability, what a difference it would make. And we're already seeing that it has and it will. These are the values that are core, that are embedded into our program. There are 5 co-equal values, and they come from a lot of stakeholder review. This process of developing the Good Food Purchasing Program was an extensive 2-year process of stakeholder input as well as research. At the time we embarked on this, A.G. Kawamura was the Secretary of Food and Agriculture, and he served on our task force. And I remember making a presentation at the very beginning to the California State Board of Food and Agriculture at the time about what we were planning to do. And it was well received and supported, and we went forward. But A.G. Kawamura helped us with a lot of the ideas that we're putting together around the Food Policy Task Force as well as this program. So we did an extensive amount of national research on procurement programs and ended up developing our own around these 5 values of supporting local economies, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, fair labor practices, and of course nutritional health. And we started developing the standards with a lot of expert input. As an example, with the nutritional health category, this was in Los Angeles at the time, so the Los Angeles Department of Public Works helped write that category with local economies. We took a lot of information to account from a lot of the experts here in California, as well as farmers. Farm bureaus, we had representatives from the Farm Bureau in our region, Ventura Farm Bureau, et cetera. So with that process, we developed the standards and then vetted it once we had a manuscript for the standards and ideas of how it would work, and vetted it with different implementing entities, businesses, food service providers, food distributors, farmers, et cetera, anybody who would be involved along the supply chain as well as the NGO community, and incorporated their input and received their approval to go ahead and proceed. So we did, and in 2012, as I mentioned, were adopted by the City of Los Angeles by executive order of Mayor Villaraigosa, and then also by the LA Unified School District by a motion of their school board. In 1 year, we saw a significant impact. They went from less than 10% local sourcing of produce to an average of 60% in 1 year. And that was largely because they hadn't, as a food service institution, really, they'd been looking at nutritional health, but they hadn't been incorporating those other attributes, and we asked them to through this program, and they did. And it made a big difference. So not only did it, in that first year, redirect $12 million into the local food economy, but it created 150 new jobs. The regional food processor, Field Fresh, started a whole new line of food processing for that particular increased local demand. And then it also had this other radiant effect in terms of the food distributor, Gold Star Foods, started looking at, they were empowered to adopt this through the RFP, the request for proposal that was, we were bound into the request for proposal, and so they started sourcing their baked goods, their wheat, locally and also sustainably. So that impact kept continuing, and then they also started looking at their meat purchases and started a requirement that there would be antibiotic-free meats as well, and that's been taking place. So this is how our standards look. That's the manual, which is it's a manuscript and it's designed, and that's the cover of it for this year. So our first version was in 2012, again after a 2-year extensive process of stakeholder input and vetting, and then we did that again for an update in 2017. So that's the cover for the 2017 version 2 of the standards, and we plan 5-year updates with our standards committee, which I'll tell you about in a second. But basically, our standards work something like if you've heard of LEED certification, do you know how that works? So it's analogous to that, so that in LEED certification, there's a number of ways that a building can achieve a rating, either certification or silver, gold, platinum. So they accumulate points within these different categories of building design and management, including energy efficiency and solar and so forth, water management. So we have the 5 categories that we mentioned to you, and there's baseline standards like an entry point for each one, 15% of the spend of an institution in local, et cetera, and then they can get more points. It's a tiered system. They can get more points as if they decide to move up the tiers. So an example of that is with local. So baseline would be 15% of all food purchases are local within state. You can get more points if it's local within 200 miles, and even more points if it's local within 200 miles and from a smallholder farm. So our intention is to preference the smaller-holder farms, and we use the USDA definitions for smallholder farms. And we're directing them toward mid-sized farms. We understand the issue with smaller farms and institutional purchasing, so we give them extra points if they have a program for that, if they decide to do, say, a CSA program for their teachers or in some other way support the small farmers. But in any event, it's geared toward getting more points for the smaller farms. It's also certification-based, so we direct them to, we don't have our own set of standards, we direct them to existing standards. There's already a lot of work out there. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we collect up existing standards like organic, like Fair Trade Certified, and like California Thursdays from the Center for Eco-Literacy. So we point them to certifications and programs that we know are good, that are already in existence. We just give them a guide for how, if they purchase along these lines, this is how it can be rated. They get points. It's reflected back in a star rating. So we then also do a lot of data analysis. I'm sorry that I wanted to talk to I forgot his name, but that was fascinating presentation. And I was sitting there taking copious notes thinking, we need to talk. So I'll trace them down. But we do a lot of data analysis. So we get farm level purchasing data from the institutions. That's part of the deal. They sign on to our program. They give us their farm level purchasing data. We have a team of analysts. We analyze it. We actually are building out even more automation in our tech platform right now, but we analyze it, and then we reflect it back in reports. We have a team in a flight to New York right now to give them their first preliminary draft of a report, because we just got a lot of their purchasing information. We'll let them know how they do. It's a way for them to build their own set of sort of transparency, so they can know how they're doing in that, and it's a feedback loop for them, so they can see where they're going and set goals and start making some shifts, and we do celebrate success. So in our first year, once we decided in 2015 to move out of LA, we pretty much expanded pretty quickly. Went to San Francisco and Oakland, and now, and these other places around the country, and even more, because what's not shown on the map is that we're also now in North Carolina. We have conversations in Florida. There's a lot going on around the country. I can report to you now that in California, the average local spend from the 3 combined school districts is $15 million. The average now with LA is about 40% of produce, 20% in San Francisco, and 47% in Oakland, which is doing great. So these are some of the participating school districts from around the country, with a lot of assessments underway. You'll see also Baltimore and Minneapolis. And this is our standards committee. So I mentioned to you that we do a 5-year update. There's a number of entities that serve on our standards committee. This is some of the logos of those. There's also very expert individuals who provide input, but you'll notice there's Tufts University, UC Davis, we have the American Heart Association, Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, and more, and they organize in subcommittees around the different values that we have in our standards. So this is an example of a report from one of our it's a hypothetical report, but you'll see this is how it works. Once we get their information, this is what we reflect back to them. And so you can see how this particular food service institution decided to get their points in their 3-star rating. It depends on sort of the choices they make in their purchasing. But any institution can do it in whatever combination of ways they want. They could decide they're really going to bump it up and excel in local, or they could decide they're really going to bump it up and excel in environmental sustainability or fair labor, or all of them. And we have some actual successes to report to you, like Oakland, which I mentioned before, which received a 4-star. We also recently awarded a 5-star to Boulder, Colorado. So it's very doable in school districts if they have a setup, so that they can manage it. And Oakland, by the way, is mostly working on the federal school lunch program. So 73% of their students, and this is true for most of the public schools that we work with, are funded by the federal school lunch program, which is about $13 billion, and it goes to lower income communities. They have a very restricted food budget, and they're able to do this without raising costs too much on the federal reimbursement rate of about $2.70 a meal. This again is just an analysis that was done on Oakland Unified's food print. They actually reduced their meat, moved toward a more plant-forward diet, and that started making some shifts. And an entity named Friends of the Earth, an organization, analyzed what that meant in terms of water savings and reduced carbon footprints. This is our national campaign committee. So I mentioned to you that we're around the country, and we do this through partnerships on the ground. There's organizations that advance our work in different municipalities, and these are among those that are participating with us around the country. And this is the peer-to-peer network. So part of what we do also is we're sharing best practices within the institutions. Once they're enrolled in this and adopt it, we're bringing them together so that they can share best practices. We also just a few months ago were able to announce a partnership with the Urban School Food Alliance. So that's the alliance of the largest 11 school districts in the country, and they expect to have more. So we'll be working with them and their network of schools. We also celebrate success since we're national, our celebrations are mostly social media based, and we have a Good Food Heroes Award that we give out on Food Day every year. So we're well on track to what we expect to be our reach in 2020. And we're actually already a bit ahead of schedule. This was our projected reach based on the communications we were receiving from school districts and other municipalities around the country expressing interest in our program. And we're now, as of today, we're now analyzing $895 million worth of municipal food purchasing and reflecting back to them how they're doing according to these standards. And we expect that we will be able to hit these targets. So this is what we're seeing in terms of the transformation of healthier meals, reduced environmental impact in terms of carbon reduction, the regional investment in local food system transformation going from aggregate now, or even a little bit more than that, to hopefully in 2020 of over $224 million and even more if we can accelerate this program, maybe by partnering up with some blockchain companies or otherwise. So that's the overview. I do have more slides and appendix on what the different categories, how they work, if you're interested in that, but I thought I'd stop here and see if you have any questions.
Right, thank you. I really appreciate the presentation. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
I know we have a hard deadline, I think around 11:30. We need to be on a Skype call, so
Okay.
we're going to try to have short questions or maybe a couple. Andy?
Great presentation. You're doing
Thank
an
you.
awesome job.
Thank you.
How is this funded? How are you funded?
Yeah, so we have a combination of a lot of philanthropic investment right now, but we also have earned revenue, so we charge for our assessments and review to the school districts, and they're pretty happy to have this tool, so it falls within their budget generally.
And how large of a team do you have to do this?
Well, I mean, we have a team of 6, but we also have a number of contracts, so that's our staff, but then we have MOUs and contracts with other entities that are doing a lot of our work. So we're on contract with the social media company, with our tech company, with, so if you add that all in, we've got quite a few people that we're managing. We just don't have to pay for them all
Yeah.
in the same way.
Are you based in LA?
I am, but we're a virtual office, so we're around the West Coast. So a number of us are in Berkeley. I'm in LA. One's in Ojai. We have people in Seattle.
Thank you.
Don? Rochelle?
So I just want to congratulate you on this work. Coming from a small-scale food service person, it's really impressive what you can do, especially with LAUSD, considering where their school lunch food program at 80%. I was at 100%. It was very, very challenging to find
On free and reduced,
healthy
you mean?
food. Yes.
Yeah, it's like 90%.
Yes,
LAUSD,
yeah. I'm just curious, I mean, obviously your focus right now is in the school districts. Have you been exploring, has there been any thought, or is there any other entity that is looking into hospital food purchase?
Yeah, well, actually, we're in school districts, but also municipalities. So the city of LA had adopted it. So we're at the LA World Airports, we're at the Griffith Park, the Brecken Parks, the Greek Theater, and that's true for San Francisco as well. We're working with their jails. And in New York, we're also working with their hospitals. So we have a good relationship with Healthcare Without Harm, which also has a program in hospitals. So we're sorting out, how that'll roll out. But we're developing a lot of partnerships with them as well. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you very much. You're doing a wonderful job. I'm curious, I was on the school board for a number of years in my little community, and on your achievement chart, to me, in our school district makeup is very similar to what you have in Oakland here. And for me, the most important thing was healthy, fresh food. And can you get a high rating if you have a 1 or a 2 on the healthy portion of this, on the nutrition portion? I'm just curious how that's weighed, because especially in schools, the quality of the food is just so important. So does that get heavier weighting than the other factors?
Yeah, so all 5 categories are weighted equally. But the way they get points in the nutrition category is through a series of best practices. Since that's not a purchasing, it's more of a offering, it's how they offer in place and so forth. So, yeah, and where they, what they serve, how they serve it, the less minimally processed food, all of that is part of the nutrition category. And a number of the school districts have been focusing on that for a while. They tend to do fairly well and get a fair number of points in that area. And then the points aggregate into the star rating. So you couldn't just do one category and nothing on the others. It's
You have 5 categories. And
right.
They scored a 1 or a 0 on healthy food.
That would be a missing the call.
Right.
No, they have to. Sorry, now I get your question. I'm sorry. They have to do well in that one too. Yeah, in all of them. So.
Paula, when you started sourcing locally, did your costs go down because of that, or?
So with the school districts, the cost was neutral because they had, most of these large institutions have their contracts with their food distributors through an RFP process or a request for proposal. So they set the price parameters and what they also want the bidders to respond to. So they set the price parameters and they said, and also comply with this standard, the Good Food Purchasing Program.
So you essentially got fresher, higher quality food at essentially the same price.
Essentially the same price. So basically what it was kind of the distributors rewiring
Right.
to get this, because that's what was demanded.
Yep. Maybe one last question, Martha?
Here's a tough question. I read a couple years ago that though we can serve more healthy food for kids were not eating the healthy food, or they were bypassing it. Or is there a rating on the back end for the waste of it? Because at the end of the day, the taste is what makes the kids eat this or not.
We do have a food waste component to the program as well, but a lot of that is through our partners, some of our partners who work on the educational level in terms of helping people access nutrition that's provided to them. So we do have partners on the ground who do that as well.
Thank you. I'm always interested in the local aspect of this, and I think it's really, in California, we're kind of myopic because everything is local with the access we have. But how do you do that in Minnesota in the middle of winter time?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. And what we have decided to do, when we moved it out of Los Angeles, we decided that we would let each region determine local. And they could tell us what made the most sense for them. So we go through a process where, as we go through the adoption process, we'll come up with a new standard for their region. And I think it was, I had a conversation with, I think it was Minnesota. It was either Minnesota or Wisconsin about hoop houses and how we could incorporate that type of production and what the standards would be for that into our standards. So that's underway. But for example, in Philadelphia, we know that their region actually includes New Jersey, New York, and Baltimore, whereas Pittsburgh's might be another. So they're all defining their own regions. And in North Carolina, we're coming up with a new definition there. The idea is to have a region that makes sense in terms of transformation, that makes sense that it's your rural and regional economy, and that you can develop all the indirect benefits of that for the people who live and work in the region, so that you're having that strong communication with however that geography works economically. Yes, I am. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Makes your food edible in school. Yeah, what kind of healthy lunch did you bring us today?
Did we use a good food purchasing policy for lunch?
Yeah, for CDFA.
I'll have to check on that.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move
right,
on.
thank
Thank you very much, Paula. That was great. Our next presentation is going to be via Skype.
So we're going to try to see if we can do that right now.
All right.
I said we're going to push her back, but hopefully.
Oh, okay.
We're going to go live.
So enhancing local food production. Should I make the introduction and see if you can hook up, or?
Well, I think we're going to try to hook up right now, so we're going to see what happens.
All right.
Momentary delay.
I'll go ahead with the introduction, and they'll do their, it sounded like somebody's connected. So Linda Muller is with Farm Logic, LLC. Linda's the CEO and president of Farm Logic, launching the business from her kitchen table in 2012. And today, Linda oversees the national corporate and governmental partnerships, as well as the strategy and scale of the Farm Logic technology platform. And hopefully Linda is on. Well,
Momentary delay.
momentary delay. Frank, you could have asked a couple more questions. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, but I was trying to keep us on our tight schedule.
Hi, Linda, are you on? Hi, Linda, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect, yes, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so, you know what? I'm getting a lot of feedback on my end.
Yeah, we'll try our folks to see if we can turn that down for you. And we're working to get your screen shared as well.
let me know when it is shared. I actually just, it says that I'm presenting.
Yes, we see your screen now.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
And we're going to mute on our side, so hopefully you don't get that feedback. We're not hearing it on our end.
Okay, sounds good. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound great, Linda. This is Don Cameron. We've already introduced you and your little bio there, and welcome to our board meeting. So if you'd like to, just you can get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, that's terrific.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking out the time to hear more about our program. My name's Linda Mallers. I'm the CEO and founder of FarmLogix. We're a technology platform that connects buyers and sellers in a large capacity. We work in institutional markets, farm to school, farm to healthcare, farm to university. We do a lot of work in the food service space, and we also do work for the USDA and State Department, so of Agriculture and Education. So you'll see some examples of that. With me is Leslie Fowler, our Chief Commercial Officer, who actually was the former Nutrition Director for Chicago Public Schools. She joined us recently. We're very lucky to have her. And Cliff Porsenheim, our COO. So basically on this first slide, you'll see that our model is really around automating supply chain and bringing technology innovation to food supply chains, connecting farmers with buyers. And our mission is to bring visibility to farmers of all sizes so that institutional markets can see their local and regional offerings, provide aggregation for equitable buyer participation, and provide insight and analytics to basically tell the story and quantify programs. A little bit about us. There's 18 of us. We're headquartered in Chicago, but we work all over the country. We have a 10-member tech team. We were Google's Earth Week podcast last April. We went out to Mountain View and actually did a webinar from their headquarters. We've been to the White House to speak 2 times, most recently in August. Secretary Perdue had a small roundtable around the use of blockchain and technology that we were invited to. We're a 2013 winner of the Chicago Innovation Awards, a 2016 winner of the Food to Market Challenge, which was a $500,000 supply chain competition in Chicago to increase local procurement. We offer solutions for food service, broadline distribution, institutions, GPOs, and restaurants. We've invested $5 million in our technology to date, and it is proprietary and patent pending. We have a national farm sourcing network that currently has 50,000 farms and regional vendors in it, and we've identified $600 million of sustainable and local food tracked and procured throughout the country. Our team consists of 2 MBAs. 4 of us have graduate degrees in computer science and data science, including myself. The head of our tech team has a PhD in mathematics. Leslie obviously has a lot of urban school food service expertise. She also is a former board member of the Urban School Food Alliance. We have management consulting on our team, expertise on our team. Our VP of supply chain comes from Robinson. And then we have a whole team that does logistics and customer support. And personally, I actually come out of a agricultural commodity background. I'm being from Chicago, I come out of the Board of Trade and the Mercantile Exchange, actually. So that's a little bit about us. As far as our system, this is a bird's eye view of our supply chain system. So basically, we have the industry's largest search engine for local and sustainable products. So most people start here searching for product. What's cool about it is that it is user defined. So as you know, everybody always asks us, what does local mean? And local is in the eye of the beholder. So you can set it by a state program, or a mileage radius. From there, purchasing can take place, virtual purchasing. We have a cloud platform. You can purchase on a mobile device, on a laptop, or on a desktop. We have business management tools that send POs to farmers, and farmers have free access to our tools that include labeling and barcoding to be FSMA and food safety compliant. Usually a lot of the products will go possibly to a co-packer who also has those same tools. And then our technology manages the logistics in the middle. And distributors have dashboards to see the orders come in. The product then gets to the distributor, goes to the actual locations, and the program manager, whether that be a State Department of Ag or Ed or the USDA or Aramark or anybody like that, can run detailed metrics on the success of a program. Basically, what we've seen in running this program, and we've been running it since 2013, is that there's no single definition of local or sustainable. Data collection tends to be very siloed and complex to collect to tell a full story. That also prohibits transparency. The outdated warehouse processes that can't support small farms, mostly due to slotting limitations within distributor warehouses. This lack of transparency creates consumer mistrust who don't often believe claims that they see on packaging. And then one-off solutions tend to result that prohibit market efficiency and prohibit data collection. So that's really what we see as challenges for the buyer. For the seller, we see a lack of volume commitment for smaller growers and a lack of forward contracting. We see that existing contracts with larger vendors bar market entry for small farms. Time that farmers have to spend on sales and marketing reduces their time on the farm. Regulatory compliance and food safety create a lot of new process complexity for smaller farmers, and technology and equipment costs increase their costs, as well as inefficient logistics, which reduce market opportunity. So these are some of the hurdles that face the seller. We address these hurdles with 3 technology tools. One we had mentioned is Open Fields, which is our search engine. 2 is Aggregate, which are e-commerce platforms that we deploy by region. And 3 is Metadata, which is our reporting and analytics engine. So getting in a little bit into the Open Fields search engine, it's the largest and first industry-neutral searchable database of local and sustainable foods by vendor and distributor inventory. You can search by mile radius, state or state program. We track 85 attributes for sustainability against all food categories such as produce, meat, dairy, eggs, seafood, and specialty goods. And we also have templates for institutions to run third-party sustainability audits for programs such as HG Stars, Healthcare Without Harm, Real Food Challenge, the Good Food Purchasing Policy. Just a little bit about Open Fields. You'll see here a screenshot that has some results and some filters set. You'll see the maps that are able to be generated that show where a grower is located and what they grow. Results can be saved as a list that can also be used for subsequent purchasing. The database so far tracks the activity of 524 distributors. It has 69,000 products inside, 85 attributes. We've cleansed, actually now it's almost up to $8 billion, and we've qualified about 800 million as sustainable. There's a 50,000 producer network in the system, and I went in there and did a search for California, what we have currently, and identified 3,358 products. The aggregate marketplace is where the procurement takes place, and this is an example of what somebody would see when they go inside. The product is state identified. There's a photo, a price, a pack size, miles to the location. So this is GPS enabled. So this would be mileage to the person who is taking a look from the farm itself. It'll say who sells that product. If there is a certification such as organic or GAP, that would be listed. We do have a certification management tool in the system that not only keeps track of certifications, but also keeps track of their expiration. And then there are notifications that go out to both the grower and the managing entity when a certificate is close to expiration. And then any attributes, whether if this product is locally sourced. So basically, we run this program as far as farm to school goes as a pre-book program. We take orders a month ahead of time. This allows, and for instance, we have this program active in Illinois where we've got about 47 school districts that all go on and order a month ahead of time. when the guide closes at the end of, let's say, December for January, the farms will receive growing commitments for all of January. So they'll receive a single order that really is made up of all participating school districts. The distributor's dashboard will display the actual detail on who ordered and when they would like the product, but for the farmer, they just get a notification of volume and weekly delivery. The multi-buyer aspect of this creates the volume that farmers need to be successful. What's great for the school district or hospital or university is that they get to see the farm at the time of order. So right here it says GFS local, but it also would be a farm name. It shows the miles, attribute transparency, and basically we often run this as a cross-dock program for distributors so that it will come in just in time, often the day before, so that they don't have to slot it, and that's how farm identification gets maintained. Basically, we ran this program last year, and 45 districts on the East Coast and Texas supported 35 farms and put $800,000 into the local economy, and all of that was identified by farms, school district, product, and spend. And everybody who participates has dashboards to run their own analytics on their own program, and then the program manager, which in this case is Illinois Farm to School, can run reports on all activity. So we've run this in the East Coast and in Texas. We're running it now in Illinois. And we're going into Michigan with it and Indiana as well. So we all up and down the East Coast through New England, the Mid-Atlantic, Texas, Illinois, Indiana. This is what it looks like when you go in to place an order. As we said, we often take orders a month ahead. So there are tabs at the top for each week of the delivery month. And so you can place an order for the first week, second week, third week, fourth week. You can see all the products in the guide. And then this is an example of a report that is being run. So this is a report from last school year of $511,000 and 322,000 pounds. And then this is a school district, what they bought. So this is just an example. Now, this is a self-service report that a district is able to run on their own from their own dashboard. On the farmer side, when orders come in, farmers receive a dashboard as well where they receive purchase orders. They have the opportunity to print labels, bills of lading. They also have the ability to enter in their food safety information. So you'll see here the harvest date. They can enter in their field information, their packing date, their shipping date, how the product was delivered, the expiration date of the product, who picked it up, and the farm. This is what a label would look like. It can contain their logo. The barcode at the bottom can contain all sorts of information and can be customized. It can have the distributor's SKU. It can have a manufacturer code. It can have a PO number. And then this QR code goes back to marketing material that we maintain for that farmer. So basically on the vendor management side, we provide food safety tools. We provide the ability to participate in e-commerce. And this program is also used to manage some state programs. We've used it to manage Buy American programs, USDA Buy American programs. We're in our second year managing the Michigan 10-cent program. We're managing all of the invoicing that happens between the farmers and the school districts for that program. And this technology was also used to manage the USDA pilot for the state of Michigan for both the 2016-17 and 17-18 school year. As we know, that program may or may not be continuing, but we have managed it for the last 2 years. And obviously, as discussed, the certification management and then the marketing management. So this year in Illinois, we opened it up to all K-12 districts in the state of Illinois to use this platform to facilitate farm to school. We've got some of the big players using it. Cisco Chicago uses it. Chicago Public Schools uses it now independently. And we have formed a collaboration on this project with the National Farm to School Network. Just in September and October alone, the platform tracked $3.9 million into the Midwest farming economy. These are just some screenshots of tools that farmers receive. This is an example right here of how they can control their inventory with seasonality. You can control both your inventory and turn products on and off really easily with seasonality. The labeling that you just saw, PO management, for instance, if a farmer is not going to be able to fulfill a whole order, an alert goes out so that the buyer knows that they are not going to get the quantity that they ordered. This is where all of the food safety information gets entered before the label is printed out. This here is an example of a bill of lading. This is what a dashboard looks like here to manage orders. And then this is what a certificate management dashboard looks like. So basically, farmers have the ability to manage their own certificates and their own attributes around their products, but also program managers can do it on their behalf. We sometimes will, particularly in the Midwest, work with some Amish networks that are not really interested in getting onto a laptop and engaging with the system, and so that gets managed on their behalf by their food hub. So this is an example of program data management. So this actually is Michigan's actual pilot report. And you'll see that this actually is auto-generated from our system, and they will be able to run metrics on the entire system. What ended up happening is everybody because I know you're a pilot state as well, everybody had a dashboard. The distributors had dashboards to upload their invoices, as did the farmers. The school districts had dashboards to approve the invoices. The invoices then went to the State Department of Ed that was able to approve those invoices, and then it went to the USDA. And when the USDA approved them for payment, they would mark the invoice as paid, and then they could put in their commodity procurement number and enter that in, so that if there was ever a discrepancy or an issue, you could go back and look up that particular paid invoice. So you can see here that Cisco Grand Rapids entered in an invoice on June 12th. They finally submitted it on the 15th, so you can save it in a draft form. On that same day, the Department of Ed confirmed that those invoices, and it was paid by the USDA on July 11th. So this is just an example of how they have engaged with the system. So basically, with the system, you have real-time self-service reporting. It can run statewide programs. The reports are by custom definition of local. We work with states that have, like, I'm going down to Kentucky in a couple weeks for their Kentucky Proud program. We've worked with Rhode Island, whose sourcing is their own state, which is a challenge. I mean, it's a wonderful agricultural state, it's just small. And so everybody's got their own definition. The system is used to manage public-private partnerships, and really we get public entities and private companies to play very well in the sandbox together, and we can explain a little later on how that works. We show ROI for programs. So basically, this is used for the pilot and the 10-cent program. It's also used for Chicago Public Schools, the National Farm to School Network. Aramark uses it for their enterprise reporting, and we were just awarded the Urban School Food Alliance contract for their spend management. They put out an RFP a couple months ago that we were just awarded, and so we'll be using this system as well to help them manage their spending. This is an example of third-party reporting. Some of your state organizations, such as your healthcare systems and universities, participate in third-party programs such as Healthcare Without Harm, Real Food Challenge, and ASHI Stars. And so basically, we have templates inside the program that automate that reporting and make it easier for them. This is an example of one of those reports. And then as far as public-private partnerships, what we do there is very often, like, how do we get Cisco to give us data so that the Illinois Farm to School Network can promote their activities? And the way we do that is we convert all spending to pounds, so you'll never see us promote a case count and a cost at the same time, where that distributor becomes vulnerable for exposing their pricing. And so we basically have a pretty sophisticated algorithms in our system that convert all case weights to pounds, or case costs to pounds, so that we report out on pounds. So we'll list the total spend at the top, like this report is $4.2 million across 41 customers and 47 farms, but the actual products are listed by pounds. So this is one of our private-public partnership tools. This is just an example of like what a state would look at. This is actually Airmark's dashboard that they use this as an enterprise, where they can run breakdowns by how much poultry, sustainable poultry they're moving, seafood, meat, where it's coming from, and then they can see maps of all their farms. They can see the spend. If they want, they can actually see the latitude and longitude where it's located, you know, who they're selling to, et cetera. So this is just a very high level analytics that can be pulled from the system. And then we'll just end briefly here with some examples of what can be done with these tools. When we won the Food to Market Challenge, it actually was to partner with a nonprofit to take Chicago Public Schools and offer a CSA program so that the healthy food that the kids were eating in the school could be brought home and enjoyed at home as well. So this was all farm identified healthy products going into low income communities. This is a great system for food equity. I think what we're most proud of is that our food, that we think of local not as a movement of privilege, but of one of equality, and are really focused on getting good food everywhere. And so this is a program that actually accomplished that in a big way. We moved a lot of boxes, and it was very successful. It was great to work at the pickups and see not just students and their caregivers, but people in the community who lived in the neighborhood, particularly the elderly, coming and picking up boxes as well. And then this is some examples of some marketing around our farm to school activity. So this image here is actually a Chicago Public Schools website that we run for them. We run a little Instagram competition for students called If My Food Could Talk. And then we have for the, yeah. And then we have a flyer series for younger kids called The Farmer in My Lunch Line. So when we do a local serve, it's actually promoted the day before. The students get to taste it in the classroom. We bring farmers into the classroom, which is why this little boy has that big cabbage. And we have quizzes that the kids take that teach them that the food actually is grown and all the steps to get it to them. So that's a little bit about that. And you can kind of see this is an example of the farm to school program we run for CPS. Because we take orders ahead of time and we're so transparent, you can see exactly what's being served in December and the actual dates and the actual farms. So we run a no antibiotic ever chicken, fresh chicken, whole muscle chicken program for CPS that comes from a farm in Indiana, and we have a farm in Illinois doing roasted potatoes, and then we have a farm in Michigan doing a coleslaw. So this is just some examples of that. This is an example of bringing the farmer into the classroom. So this was the farmer visiting. And then we have the Farmer in My Lunch Line video series. So, and if you go to cpsfarmtoschoolmarket.com, you can look at this website and check out the video. And we can also just show you quickly what a report actually looks like. So if I was to go in here and pick August of 2018 through October of 2018, and I picked Chicago Public Schools. And I'm going to pick all locations because there's 720 of them and don't want to check 720 boxes. You can put a mile radius in here. I'm just going to put 500 miles. And then it'll generate the report. And I can check local procurement. And you can customize a message at the top here. And just to show you how the report can be run by miles, by state, or by a custom local program. And then the report just self-generates. And so here you can see the $4.2 million, and you can see exactly how it breaks down by product. So that actually that's it. So I know that I wanted to make it brief so we could make time for questions. So thank you so much for your time. I look forward to answering any questions you have.
Yeah, Linda, we have a lot of questions, I guarantee you. I've got one to start off with, and the program's wonderful. It's great to see that you're providing access to the small growers Could you kind of run through how that, I mean, I know you've ran through it, but if I was a grower and I had to aggregate with several other growers to make a purchase for a buyer large enough, how do I mean, I understand you have people, you put your product up ahead of time, but you're taking it to a central location. Is it a cold storage? Is it somebody else's location? And then how's the price determined? And then who takes care of the transportation?
Okay, so you know what? Great questions, and in each situation it's different. You had seen that we have a pre-order program that we use very often with healthcare, K-12, and higher ed. And that program is perfect for a smaller buyer that wants to participate in an institutional market because there's a lot of heads up and planning. So basically what we'll do, and we're going into a new region in the Southeast soon, and we're just about to start building out that supply chain. So basically once a grower knows they're interested in participating, they would send us a list of what they currently grow and what they'd also be interested in potentially growing. Sometimes people will grow new things if they know there's a market for them. And so basically we get them set up in the system. If there's gap requirements, then we make sure the certification is uploaded, et cetera, create the profile for them, et cetera. But we also make sure that we don't overextend anybody. So what is your volume limit? And so sometimes it's a matter of matchmaking where you matchmake a smaller grower with a smaller school district, and then you matchmake larger growers with a larger school district. But one thing we make sure of is we have to know whose product is going to what school. So we do segregate runs for processing by farm. We may have a blend that has the parsnips are from one farmer, but the sweet potatoes are from another. But we always try to have a processing run by one farm. So you could have 4 farms providing a product to a single district, but schools 1 through 20 are going to get one farmer's product, 21 through 40 are going to get the second farmer's product. We keep very careful track. So basically we manage that complexity. The farmer does not need to manage that complexity or even manage the school relationship. The schools love to know who's growing their food, but they don't have to manage it. All they have to manage is getting it to someone's door. And if they don't have the ability to provide refrigerated transportation, we often do that. So we'll arrange for a pickup. Very often the distributor will go and get it. So we explore what the capabilities are for delivery. We've never asked a farmer to deliver more than once or twice a week. That would be it. So basically we try to make it as easy as possible. Does that answer your question in full?
Yep, that was great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yep, Martha?
I have asked questions. Thank you so much. This is an amazing program. Having worked with, I think you mentioned you work with a Cisco, for example. So let's say the farmers said they're going to deliver, but they don't deliver. And I know Cisco has these nasty little clauses that says if you don't deliver, they go to the market and they buy. How do you manage that, or do you manage that?
Well, so I got a little feedback on your question. It was hard to hear. I just want to say, you wanted to know what happens if a farmer doesn't deliver?
There you go.
Okay,
yes.
So basically, I mean, particularly Chicago Public Schools is a perfect example. When something's on the menu, it's on the menu. And there's no such thing. We can't turn around and say we're not going to be able to deliver. So there's there's steps in that process. The first thing we do is if a farmer can't deliver for any reason, because they don't have the product or whatever it is, we have to go out and source that product elsewhere. And so we'll try to source from another local farmer if we have to. And then, if we have to also source that product at a neighboring state, we'll do that. I mean, so we kind of go down the line. Is it really truly impossible for the farmer to be able to deliver that product? Is there somebody else who can provide it that's local? Is there a neighboring state that has it? And then sometimes what we'll do to keep it local, particularly if it's a school product and it's, let's say, a carrot, USDA requirement is for an orange vegetable, we may swap that for a butternut squash because it still meets the dietary requirement. So we just try to be as creative and flexible as possible. And believe me, I mean, like, we just had this happen. We were doing a coleslaw. You probably saw it on that December menu. And right now, I mean, we're in the Midwest, and so cabbage is almost done. And we just found out, oops, the red cabbage is not happening. So we had to double up on the green, and it's just a green cabbage slaw with carrot. It was going to have red and more color in it, but it's not going to. So does that answer that question?
100%. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Everybody's freezing.
Anybody else? So Linda, one more question I had was, that I asked earlier, but how do you determine price for the product?
Well, the farmer always determines their own price. We're not going to tell anybody what to charge, but if the market will not bear that price, they'll know it soon enough.
You just got everybody,
You're
all the
laughing.
farmers here ready to sign up.
Right. So it's really up to the farmer. So basically, in the school world, it's pretty cut and dry because they've got a price per meal, and literally we're told you have this much to spend to put this on the plate. Now, Leslie is here, and I mean, she's the most creative nutrition director I know, and so what she often did, and now we're lucky enough to have her expertise with our sourcing, is she will, spend more on the local serve and then get creative on where to cut her budget elsewhere so that net her spend is the same over time. But so we're very transparent with the farmer about what we can afford to pay. I don't know if you're familiar with Will Allen, the farmer in Wisconsin who runs Growing Power, but for 2 years he provided crinkle-cut carrots to Chicago Public Schools. We literally would buy like 30,000 pounds at a time, which is one day's lunch at CPS. And year 3, he said, you know what, you're paying me 37 cents. I can get $1 and sell all my carrots to restaurants. Like, go ahead, please. I mean, that's great. And so we ended up getting the carrots elsewhere moving forward. But it's really up to the farmer. If they want, they tell us what they want to charge, and then we let them know what the budget is.
Excellent. Eric?
Yeah, hi, thanks. This was really interesting. So I guess the question that I have is predicated on my understanding of Midwestern agriculture, which is that it's, heavily focused on corn and soy production. And so I'm curious if you've been able to see any signal through this program of actually helping farmers diversify away from that sort of dominant crop. Is it moving the needle? Is there a chance that if you scale these things up that you could do more of that?
Yeah, okay, so that is predominant in our state in Illinois. I mean, so a lot of the sourcing that we end up doing is in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Indiana and Ohio, where more food is grown. But what we are seeing is that these large producers, particularly there's an organization called Farm Illinois, and they had a roundtable day of, just discussion around that very topic. And we're starting to see the new generations that are taking over the farm really making room to grow food, which is really cool. I mean, I think I can think of 4 pretty large farms in the Midwest where the new generation is growing more food. But I think obviously, it is what it is in Illinois. I mean, and but we are starting to see that, and I think it's really looking to that new generation of farmer.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Looks like we're out of questions. I think they're getting, we're up against lunch here, so.
Okay, well, can't compete with that.
Yep. Hopefully healthy, nutritious lunch.
Yeah.
So Linda, no, thank you very much for your presentation. It's really fascinating to see what you're doing there.
Oh, thank you. Well, our contact information is here, and if you'd like a copy of the deck, please reach out, and we're in California about once a month. So I'm happy to meet in person if you'd like as well at any point in time.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you, Linda. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, did you bring some firewood?
I tell this story all the time. We can't control the heat. So we have to send a note over to the Department of General Services to say, can you please turn up the heat? They say, okay. So when we come back into the room, it'll be 95 degrees, and you'll be
Right.
saying it's too hot in here, Josh. Yeah. So.
All right. Karen Brown, give us the presentation today, but just wanted to thank Zenobia for all the work that you've done putting this together. Excellent job. So Karen is creative director, is an award-winning designer who hails from a family of inventors, growers, and makers. Her work has been included in the Smithsonian Institution, the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, and featured in the New York Times, Architectural Digest, and dozens of other popular and technical publications, as well as today on NBC. So welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having us. Again, I'm Karen, and I'm here today with Zenobia, who's our co-founder and executive director, and also Adam Kesselman, who's our deputy director of programs. Just for those of you who might not know us yet, I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes of background. The center was founded in 1995, and our mission is education for sustainable living. That means that we encourage schools to teach and model sustainable practices. And we discovered quite early that school food is one of the most remarkable ways to do that kind of modeling and to carry teaching and learning throughout the school day, including right through mealtime. We also recognize that school gardens and having direct contact with food is one of the best ways to introduce young learners to the natural world. Sometimes in urban settings, it's the only contact they really have with the natural world. That's one reason the center became the founding funder of the Edible Schoolyard. And we've also had the opportunity to support and launch programs like this, which is a program called STRAW. It's Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. So far, over 40,000 children have participated in creek and stream restoration on farms and ranches in California. So we have seen dozens, probably hundreds of really remarkable school projects, but we always say our number one job is to listen. And we were hearing again and again from the people we worked with that there was something happening every single school day that was directly contradicting everything we wanted children to learn. And this is what it was, the quality of the food in schools. And probably nothing on that plate came from anywhere near California. I'm sure you all are really familiar, even though the amount of money that might be available for each meal is modest. The scope of the National School Lunch Program is absolutely vast. There are 7 billion school meals served every year in the United States, about 1 billion of them right here in California. And if you're from the Center for Eco-Literacy, a number like that becomes a very intriguing place where you might want to do some work. And we were extremely fortunate to have the support to do that, a lot of which came from the USDA. And we were able to convene stakeholders and practitioners from all throughout the school system, from in California, outside California, and even from other countries. So we met with superintendents, principals, educators, physicians, parents. It's a long list, and distilled that knowledge into a framework for redesigning school meals. It was rethinking school lunch. School meals can be complex. We've identified 10 different dimensions where districts will need to have some talent and ability in order to do well. We are extremely heartened by the reception that this resource received. It's one of the most successful things we've ever done. The USDA put it on their list of their top 10 funding successes for the decade, and it brought us a lot of opportunities, including a very big one in 2012, which is when the Tomcat Ranch Educational Foundation invited us to work intensively with one school district with the idea that it could become a model for other districts in California. So we formed a partnership with Oakland Unified, which is a large urban district. They serve about 7 million meals a year, and piloted a new program. Oakland was going to have new school, cooking facilities, and they had been on a completely kind of processed food model. Prepared meals came in, and they were on a heat and serve model. So we developed a concept called California Thursdays, and Zenobia and Adam were the progenitors of this idea. And the idea was really simple. Can you prepare and serve a healthy, fresh school meal made from California-sourced ingredients? And first for Oakland, like, could you do that once? Because even to do it once meant you had to touch the whole food system. For example, in Oakland, if they just wanted to serve some kale on the tray, one serving means first of all, they need to know where to buy fresh kale, and then they've got to process something like 1 to 2 tons of kale. How does it get delivered? Where do they store it? How do you cook it? Do your people know how to cook it? And every item on the plate is like that. But we set up the program so you can take some baby steps, if you will. Can you do it once? Can you do it once a month? Can you do it 1 day a week and then spread out to other days across the week? So Oakland, over time, got better and better at doing this, and meals that look like this began to look like this, and like this. And this was the point where we said we're ready to scale. So the very next year, we moved from 1 district in 2012 to 15 in 2013. And that first group of 15 districts contained the 2 largest in the state, LA Unified and San Diego. And then year over year, we've been expanding 42, then 58, then 71. And this year, we went to 89 districts. So this brings you completely up to date with us now. This is what it looks like on a map. 89 districts, 33 counties, about 2 million kids enrolled, and about 334 million meals, which is touching about a third of the schools and the school meals in California. Now, not every one of those meals is a perfect California Thursdays meal yet, because it's kind of a progressive program. Some districts like San Diego are fantastic in doing California food wall to wall pretty much, and others are just getting really good at doing it 1 day a week. But a lot can happen when you're looking at something big and systemic like that. And you know, we did start out as kind of an ecological education outfit, and a principle of living systems is that things thrive when you can connect networks of living communities, right? So these districts were working largely in isolation, and we provided a way for them to connect, start talking to each other, and working together in a lot of ways. So things that can come from that are, first of all, improving children's health and academic achievement. Kids who eat well do better in school. Also, enhancing local economies. And we have colleagues working both at UC Berkeley and Columbia on this circular economy model. To put it simply, when you are buying locally and hiring locally, that money is intensified in the community and sometimes directly benefits the families of the kids in those very school districts. Benefiting the environment, because the food is fresher, it doesn't need to travel as long, it's not stored as long or frozen and refrigerated, and because it tastes good and kids eat it, there's less food waste. And finally, increasing students' understanding of where their food comes from and how it reaches the table. Understanding who grows it, how nature works with it, and what their role is in having healthy food around them. Here's just an example of the impact. With the 89 districts we have now, if all those districts just served one meal, just this one, which is brown rice with some chicken and vegetables, this is what would happen if they did it one time. If they all moved to 1 day a month, look at what happens then, and then just one dish once a week. And this is just a 38, there's just 38 Thursdays in the school year, so this isn't even a full year. But it kind of gives you the idea that of the power that can come from working together. And in the limited amount of time I have today, I won't go into it, but there's a lot of recipe sharing and skill sharing so that everybody's not alone anymore. They're bringing up all of their competencies at the same time. So I want to share with you a little bit of what this looks like on the ground. From time to time, we have what we call collective action days. And that means a whole bunch of districts on a single Thursday have events for students, serve their California Thursdays meal, invite media and also local legislators and others in the community to attend. So here's, first of all, we had our last collective action day on October 25th. Oh, and also the staff at the Center for Eco-Literacy fans out. So we all try to attend different events at different districts. This is the one I went to. This was in Calistoga, and I will walk you through what they were serving that day. Those grapes are from Edison, California. The chicken is Mary's chicken from Sanger, and they brined it overnight. It was delicious. The strawberries and the spinach were from Watsonville. The pasta is one of those tricks that districts do to stretch their dollar a little farther. So the pasta itself was USDA commodity pasta, but the pesto on it came from a company in Southern California. And that roll is very special. It's whole grain. They baked it in-house. It's from Yosera Rojo wheat that was grown in California. And we have just seen absolutely fantastic California Thursdays meals like this. Here's some other stuff. This is a student from Robla, not too far from here. A staff person sent me this. The subject line in the email was, "Cutest kid ever." I agree. And this is like a very remarkable thing. This is not something we set up. We created a brand for the network, and we provide them sometimes with things like stickers and buttons and like that. But Robla did this. They made swag, basically, bags for every kid to take home to their family. Yeah, to share about the program and also to share more about what the school's doing and about food at that school. And there's one thing I think I want to say is that we had a lot of presentations about technology so far today. And this is California, and we're always going to have a lot of technology. I started my career in technology. We use technology at the Center for Eco-Literacy. But sometimes there is no substitute for this. Being on the ground in a human-to-human kind of way, sometimes there is no more trusted agent from the parent's point of view than a reliable, supportive person at school. So this stuff is very, very powerful. And again, this whole idea, we work in partnership with these districts. We don't tell them what to do, we just support them. So this was their idea and one way that they wanted to do outreach. Also this kind of thing, staff members at schools and also older students teaching younger students. This is a little display about where your food comes from. And there's taste tests. That's one way we can sometimes ensure the success of something on the menu. We do a lot of taste testing. We have resources for districts to use to do taste testing. Again, that's why they can have successful meals and not have so much waste. Wonderful maps like this. This one is from the Grass Valley, Nevada City area, showing exactly where your meal came from. Beautifully produced and branded. But the brand gives the districts a common voice and a common face. And then this is Mark Takano. He's a representative from District 41 in Riverside, wearing a California Thursdays button and having conversations with a kid about their lunch. When I was up in Calistoga, someone from Senator Dodd's office was there. We had someone in Hayward, and Eric Swalwell was supposed to come, but his wife had a baby the night before. Some excuse. But he did send a representative, and like that. And we're seeing more and more participation like this in the districts. So one thing we did, because this has gotten so big and so multidimensional, is we launched an initiative called California Food for California Kids. It contains California Thursdays, but also so many of the other programs that support it. And I'll give you just an overview of some of those. For food service, we've done professional development. Again, our background is in education, and we want to carry that through every part of everything that we do. So there are over 12,000 food service workers in the California Thursdays network. Some of them are in procurement. A lot of them are chefs and cooks and people who actually prepare the meals. So this year, in 2018, we did 4 two-day sessions in different locations around California. And here's just a couple photos of what that looks like. You can see the abundance of California-grown food. This is hands-on cooking. You can see they're having a pretty good time. They do a lot of cooking and tasting at these events. Also, because we are educators, we don't want to just have them have a nice 2-day experience and then turn them loose. We provide a lot of supporting materials like this. All of this is available for free on our website. It's a professional development guide for preparing about a dozen California specialty crops. And in regards to culinary skills, sometimes we show them how to use crops or prepare vegetables in ways they might not have thought of before, including by roasting and also by braising. These are braised green beans. We have worked at becoming detailed step-by-step visual communicators, partly because of the tremendous cultural diversity in California. There are so many different languages spoken here. There's some districts, I mean, off the top of my head, San Francisco, I think there's 47 different languages spoken in that district. And food service is representative of the composition of the community. So we want to have simple instructions, but lots of step-by-step visuals so it can work cross-culturally and multiculturally. Knife skills, and I should mention the chef who was the model for all of the photography here is Adam Kesselman.
Are you a chef? Oh, good.
Again, step by step. I mean, they're pretty great. Yeah, perfect position, everything's perfect. Procurement is very important. At the same time, you want to be sure when that food arrives with food service that they really know how to prepare it. You're like, do you know how to peel and cut a melon or chop cilantro just right? And there's also recipes in this guide, because once you have this knowledge, we want them to be able to jump in right away and start cooking. Another thing we did is recognize how important marketing is to the success of these programs. So we provided a guide for photography, so they can communicate the meals to the students and to the families and the rest of the school community. We did a simple guide so that you can take better photographs even if all you have available is your cell phone. And here's somebody from one of the workshops doing it, and she's doing everything perfectly, like use soft diffuse light, put the tray near a window, don't use a flash, style what's on there, and she's doing an absolutely fantastic job. They rated it, we did an assessment, and they rated it as one of the areas in which they thought they had the biggest improvement within photography. So here's what came out of those 4 two-day sessions. We had 111 participants. We tried to recruit them very strategically so that we had good coverage of the districts, and we had people attending who were in a state of readiness to really learn and also then help share and maybe even move into leadership positions as far as sharing skills. So those 111 participants covered 34 of our districts, which represented 97 million meals in those districts and 650,000 students. So just on that one cycle, we got some seeding to about a third of our network. Teaching and learning, of course, also extends to kids. And in 2019, we launched these resources, again, with the generous support of CDFA. Abundant California. It is 10 lessons that teach about California crops. The linchpin, or the ring that binds them all, is the first one there in the top left, about modeling the local food system so that students really begin to learn where their food comes from and the people and places that make it possible. Then every one of the other lessons is some phase in the food system. For example, planting, harvesting, transporting, storing, seed saving, and eating. That. There's a lot of activities and a lot of information. These are posters that we developed that are pulled directly from those pages. We have about, I think, 7 of these all together, and they show you important facts about these crops and what their role is in California agriculture. And also for the younger crowd, for grades K-types, this is an enrichment activity, handbook. This is for what is sometimes called informal education, which might mean garden education, after school, or summer programs. Again, there's a lot of activities in there for them, but also education about what these crops are. If you've only had a piece of a radish in a salad, you might not know it's a root. I'm going to tell you something pretty shocking. Good thing you're sitting down. A lot of adults don't know it's a root. And also all the other parts of the plant, like it has leaves and it has actually pretty beautiful flowers, right? And we made posters from this too. These posters this year won a National Design Award from Graphic Design USA in Health and Wellness. Again, thank you, CDFA. And here's what it looks like in use. The kids are really getting into their radishes, and they have their fact sheet out there. And now here's their taste test. They made radish leaf pesto, and they're eating it. And really great. Kids will kind of tend to eat what they make, you know what I mean? So it gets them. It's nutritious. It extends the food dollar at home. Can you imagine having your kid come home and saying, let's eat the radish tops? And it's also just part of a more complete nutritional package, right? Eat every part of the plant that you can. We did, we're trying to do even more and more professional development and assessment of what we do so that we can get feedback from, in this case, from educators, and then make tweaks to these lessons to improve them. So we did 2 workshops, one in Southern California and Northern California. Again, these were funded by CDFA with matching funds from Tomcat Ranch Educational Foundation, and we worked with classroom and guardian teachers. So we had 71 participants. In the pilot, just the pilot, they worked with over 1,100 students who've been exposed to this material. Those 71 teachers are going to have contact with at least 5,000 students this year. And we think that that's likely to happen because 100% of them said on their surveys that they're going to use the materials. And that's just that little set of 71. There's close to 150,000 elementary school teachers in California, and we've released all of these resources. They're available now. You can download them, and they're all free. What else? Okay, for REACH, there's a lot I could say, but in the interest of time, we'll limit it to one thing. Earlier this year, the Center for Eco-Literacy received an invitation from the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations to come there and speak on Earth Day. So we said, okay. And I was the one who got to go. That's me on the left. And it was the whole UN experience. It was the big room. It was the live video streaming. Yeah, simultaneously translated into all 6 official languages of the United Nations. And of course, we talked about our programs, including the wonderful generosity of CDFA and California Thursdays. So what do we have coming up in 2019? We're working on a whole bunch of stuff, but just a couple I'll touch on. One is the Summer Meals Program. We did one back a little over a year ago. This is promotion, to help promote the consumption of fresh California fruits and vegetables in summer meals programs. You know, kids get today about 35 to 50% of their calories through school meals, but what happens during the summer when school is out? So these feeding programs are really essential. And then also a statewide conference. We're going to be convening members of our network, and we're asking them this year to bring teams. We want multidisciplinary teams. So we'd like to see food service, yes, but also administrators and educators, so that we can start to get a more powerful systemic kind of thing going in these districts and then across districts because of the convening. So I'm going to thank you very much and ask you if you have any questions for us. Yes?
Okay, Martha, go for it.
Sorry, I'm sorry, you have to remember I'm a teacher by profession. There you go. Parents.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit of how you reach that, because after they go home, that's what they have at home.
Right. We have created some things for parents. Sometimes the most effective way actually is to work through the administration of the school, to work with food service directors and principals, because they have those channels, and we just say, how can we support you? What can we do? And we kind of do it that way. But we have created some resources for parents. In fact, we created I think, cute little book called California Tastes Amazing. And it's actual school lunch recipes, but they're scaled down to family size, like they serve 4 to 6. And the idea is that let your child pick which recipe they want, and then cook with them, and have a discussion about school food, what they like, what they don't like, and that the food is, you know, doing something at the table is always the best way to learn about something and get information and get close to somebody. So a couple of things like that we do, yeah.
We have school breakfast programs and rural area, and oftentimes there are a lot of parents that will come, and they come and they actually just kind of stand against the wall while their children eat. And I've often wondered, you know, what could we use to catch the parents' attention in that short period of time, to not only educate them. I mean, their children are educating them when they go home, but you almost have a captive audience if you could get them to look at visuals.
Yeah, well, can I talk about San Diego? should I mention it? Okay, we have something that we're going to be working on right after the new year, which is we've had an invitation from, this is an example, from San Diego Unified. I think they might have 7 sites total as a launch possibly, but to go in and work on environmental design in the dining environment, which means like, you know those posters you saw? What if we made them really big? Like something you'd see in a shopping center almost, like giant. They've got the space for it. So that's the kind of conversation we're opening up now. How can we create a wonderful dining environment so that when the families come, there's information there, and it's also just a great place for the students to be. And so we're going to be doing some modeling, I guess, around that starting, well, right after the holidays. It's a great idea.
That's a quick question. I'm coming from the early Head Start world, and the emphasis on 0 to 5 and 0 to 4, and also knowing where Governor-elect Newsom is putting a lot of emphasis in early childhood education. I just saw a lot of your information was K through 12. Does it extend into early ed?
Do you want to? Yeah. Well, the new is like K5, maybe for enrichment. Yeah. I would say it's an area we probably haven't gone into so far. One thing we have worked on to have this stuff adopted, and I should have mentioned this before, is the stuff that we do is standards-based, which means it's connected to next generation science standards, Common Core, and California Social Studies and History standards. And sometimes in the younger than that, it's not, or those kids might not be in some of the school systems where we are. They just might not be there. But I mean, this is a super, super important area.
I would love to talk to you about it, especially now with TK that are integrated into the preschool. So.
Yep. Do you have anything to say about that?
Just that we're hearing that.
Yeah, we're hearing that.
Well. That in high school.
Mm-hmm. And more. Yeah, and we have some high school stuff too, but I don't know if I can show it. I could try something. Oh, I don't know if I can. Let me just see if I can. Oh, hold on. I don't know if it'll work or not. Okay. This is something we did. This is called, hold on, please. Let's see. I don't know if I can get my navigation. I can't. This is a resource called Understanding Food and Climate Change. It's an interactive guide. I'm actually kind of going backwards with it. I can't seem to get my here we go. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Let's see if I can. Here we go. Okay, now I'm going to try something wild. Let me see if I go to the next one, because if we've got about a minute, I could show you. I don't know if this will work. I'm springing this on your very generous and kind tech to see if we can get this to work. I'm going to turn up my sound. And this is an example, like what is a food system? How many adults do you know who could answer that question? This is how we do it in about a minute and a half.
Want some ketchup with that? You see, ketchup, like everything you eat, comes from a food system. This system connects growers, processors, marketers, transportation, refrigeration, technology, government, and finance to you and consumers everywhere. So something that might seem simple, like ketchup, could be a lot more complicated than you think. Let's take a look. Ketchup starts with tomatoes grown in California. Harvested, inspected, graded and shipped, washed, sorted, chopped, peeled, and seeded. Then simmered in huge kettles until it becomes thick. Now, let's make it tasty. A pinch of salt? Sure. That salt might have traveled from a mining operation in China, or if it's sea salt, from the Mediterranean Sea. Pepper? Maybe from Vietnam or southern India. Sugar? It could have come from Thailand, Brazil, or a dozen other countries. A little vinegar to make it tart? It was made from corn from America's Midwest, subsidized by the government and traded in markets all over the world. Onions? Try Washington or Idaho. Allspice? Mexico. Cinnamon? From the bark of a tree that lives in Indonesia. Now imagine all the steps it takes to get the ketchup into the bottle you're holding. And someone had to make the bottle and the label too. And think about all the people and places, and money and time it took to get it right to you. All that just for a little ketchup. And if you think that was complicated, how about a glass of milk?
that's just a little example. There's 16 different topics in this, and it's about essentially what's the impact of climate on food, what's the impact of food on climate change, and what are some promising strategies. Right.
Any other questions? Yep, Eric?
Yeah, but that was amazing.
Yeah.
That was really great.
Your design stuff is great. I mean, I think it's, so your growth rate's pretty high, and anytime you're growing at that kind of a pace, there's always some friction. I'm just curious, what points of friction are there? Where are you seeing things slow down, or, you know, what are the phone calls you get? Like, hey, we have a crisis, we have a problem. What are some of those pressure points?
I came in as the backup. I'm the hand guy. I have different costumes. I came because we have 89 districts, and that's 89 stories, and we've been doing this for a number of years, so there's a lot of information. But it's a good point. I think the friction mostly that we're experiencing is being able to scale to meet school districts where they are and where they want to be. So, I mean, you saw how quickly we've scaled over the years. I think in 2019, we're really putting a lot of effort into high touch and getting out and being at the school districts and meeting with their partners and deploying the educational resources as well. One thing that I've seen come up this year is that you can't just change the food to get kids to eat it, that it's a complicated equation. And the thing that I've seen coming back time and time again is storyline, narrative, education, and the dining environment, actually, what Karen was talking about. So we want to facilitate all of those things coming together to help school districts rethink their school lunch. But I would say that we're not seeing friction because we really try to be like an open organization where it's a pull, not a push. We're not pushing this in. And we're not requiring school districts to do X, Y, and Z to succeed. The success is in their participation. The school, and what you saw, happy kids, happy teachers, happy food service workers, to make it a pleasant experience. But, you know, with that said, we're interested in talking to organizations like Good Food Purchasing and Farm Logics so that we can get more data to help us tell our story and the story of success. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and I might just even append onto that. And it's something that for me is particularly rewarding, and I kind of said it before, not everything happens on the internet. You know, you do not eat on the internet, you do not have a digital child. So the kind of thing that Adam's talking about, which is spending time in the field, being with people, having them know that they matter enough to you, that you're going to show up and sit down and listen to them, that really goes a long way as far as building relationships. You know, we've had some copycat programs around the country, like one of the, we were asked to take a call from the food service director for New York City Public Schools. I've told this story before maybe, but afterwards he said he knew he was on the phone with people from California because he'd never heard the word love used so much on a conference call. But it's really how we feel about those food service directors. And we tell them that all the time and try to show them how much we respect and admire them and how we want to elevate, just simply elevate what they do. One of the reasons they participate in marketing, I think, is they want to succeed, but we also frame it in a way it's like, this is how you and your staff can get the recognition you deserve. And that's very, very motivating. The program really is about them, it's not about us. And that helps a lot. The psychology of it is like that.
I want to add one thing. I just saw Laura Benavidez from LA Unified. She's the former director, and she's at Boston now, and they're going to start a Massachusetts Mondays there. So.
Yeah, and we've got Nebraska Thursdays and Minnesota Thursdays, and yeah. Think about Nebraska. Yeah, these aren't our programs. These are people who go like, well, Thursday they did it. Okay, we'll do it too. And New York City Public Schools has New York Thursdays now. Yeah.
I had a quick question about two things. One is, how do you keep traction over the summer months when the kids aren't there? And then the second one is, how would you advise people, like all of us at this time of year get asked to give what might be considered not that healthy stuff to food pantries? And so how, are you giving any guidance to people that are trying to provide canned and non-perishable things for the holiday? It's like they ask you for pasta, mac and cheese, and stuff that you look at it and you go, it's got enough salt for a week in it. What advice can you give, and how do you keep the traction going over the summer?
Well, I'll start with your second question first. We really work with school districts and school meal programs, so we aren't necessarily giving advice on how, the quality of food to donate to programs. But I think California Thursdays is about freshly prepared and California grown, and so that's sort of our torch that we carry, and hopefully that's emulated in school districts, and we see those values emulated and demonstrated in school districts. In terms of summer, we've done a number of summer meals promotion programs. We've wrapped buses. This is all with CDFA funding to support this. We've worked in San Diego. We've worked in Sacramento, Contra Costa County. I'm probably missing some, but we've had websites. So we've done a lot of promotion around summer meals. I think this is one of the targets for food service programs, to feed the students when they're not coming to school. And I'm really excited in 2019. I've been talking to Senator Pan's office. They have a summer meals coalition with 7 districts in the Sacramento area, and they want to serve 1 million meals. And so we're just talking right now about how we can support them with our CDFA Summer Meals Promotion Grant. And we're thinking big. So we're thinking billboards, we're thinking building wraps, and we're really thinking about organizing 7 districts to be on the same page, and a concerted effort with lots of attention, because oftentimes people don't know where to get the summer meals. They also don't have a reason to stay there. And so we're also looking at the educational resources that we have and creating zones where kids can play and experience nature and to learn about the food that they're eating. So summer meals is something that we're really focused on. And hopefully this can become a model for the state and a model for other summer meals programs.
Do you see any pushback from the food distribution companies at all?
No, not at all.
Shifting gears to provide other products for you?
No, we saw this as a way to drive procurement shifts in the supply chain. And in 2015, Cisco said that California Thursdays was one of the 3 market movers. So that was sort of an announcement to all of their distribution centers. They focused on it. We gave a presentation. Gold Star was very cooperative throughout the years in identifying California-grown products. And they really looked at their sourcing. So they've jumped on board because they've seen that it is a market mover. And with 89 school districts prioritizing California-grown food and freshly prepared and transparency in what they're purchasing, like the ingredients, it's been a win-win.
That's great to hear.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Karen. Okay, we're going to move on to our last presentation, which will be a panel discussion with Robin Kroc from Valley Vision, Andrew Berlag from Next Generation Foods, Michael Passmore from Passmore Ranch, Santana Diaz, EC Health, and Nick Mateus from California Grown. Yeah, our panel will provide a good opportunity to have discussion on the importance of farm to fork and what it means to the local producers, community representatives, and make this really an interactive session if we could. So when you get seated there, maybe Robin with Valley Vision, you could start us off. Valley Vision is an important member of the farm to fork community, and Well, if you could start to introduce yourself, and we'll let you kick it off. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Chairman Cameron, and sorry, I'm not quite sure how close to hold this. I feel like I'm being very loud. Thank you very much for asking me and all of us to be here to talk a little bit about the great stuff that's happening in this region. So I'm Robin Kroc. I'm a project leader with Valley Vision. I know a few of you. I've worked with Frank on several projects and Secretary Ross. Valley Vision is kind of a civic leadership organization in the region. We work in a lot of different areas. Food and ag is one of our big portfolio areas. We work closely with Visit Sacramento on the America's Farm to Fork Capital Initiative. Visit Sacramento manages kind of the marketing aspect and gets to do the fun public-facing stuff like the Farm to Fork Festival and the now iconic Tower Bridge Dinner. Valley Vision provides more content and depth to the initiative in a variety of ways, including facilitating the Farm to Fork Steering Committee, which several members of the steering committee are here. And our new event series, Farm to Fork Live, which provides kind of depth and understanding to different aspects of the food economy. So, for example, we had an event in October that a couple of the panelists and a couple other people were part of that focused on institutional purchasing and how that benefits farmers, and you'll actually be hearing more about that. Sacramento City Unified School District Nutrition Services Director was also part of that. They're in the process of building a central kitchen where once they have that, it's great to have fresh ingredients. If you don't have a place to cook it, it doesn't matter. So they're building a central kitchen where we'll be able to provide 70,000 scratch-cooked meals a day to the students in Sacramento. And the nutrition services director is a farmer's daughter, so she knows where kale comes from and where to get it. We've also been working for the past several years on strengthening the whole value chain through such ways as advancing broadband access in rural communities so growers have access to ag technologies, and supporting creation of more jobs and apprenticeship programs along the food chain. The key is to build the value chain intentionally as an economic opportunity. The Brookings Institute did an assessment of our region last year. The report was released earlier this year, looking at some of our key economic opportunities. And food and ag was one of the leading clusters in terms of a competitive advantage, and was identified as the main area that the forthcoming prosperity strategy that's being developed now should focus on. That Valley Vision is engaged with Greater Sacramento Economic Development Council, the Metro Chamber, and SACOG in developing that prosperity strategy, which will also be our CEDS, or Community Economic Development Strategy, which makes us eligible for certain federal funding. The economic strategy will include increasing local market opportunities through local sourcing. In a recent livability poll that was conducted by Valley Vision and the Institute for Social Research at Sac State, some of the questions focused around food, and over half of the respondents said that they shop at farmers markets. So we know that there is a consumer appetite in this region for locally sourced goods, and that can translate into support for institutional purchasing and support for policies that support institutional purchasing. So, for example, kind of going back to the food pantry question, the Sacramento Food Bank has, and the Yolo Food Bank as well, has over the last 5 to 10 years increased, I don't know the percent of increase, but I know it's a large amount, the amount of fresh fruits and vegetables that they're distributing to their clients. Some of that is donations. Most of it, they actually buy from farmers. So they're creating a secured market for those farmers and being part of that food system, and of course helping their clients to have better health outcomes as well. So also, according to the Brookings research, Sacramento region's most unique industry opportunity lies at the intersection of food, agriculture, and technology. The other top cluster was health and life sciences, so there is a big opportunity there to connect those clusters, and especially through the research coming out of UC Davis, and to create better health outcomes for the whole region. The Farm to Fork Steering Committee that kind of guides the America's Farm to Fork Capital Initiative, kind of puts legs under the whole economic cluster. Santana and Michael and Andrew, all of whom you'll be hearing from, they represent ways that we're trying to foster and facilitate strengthening and securing the food economy in powerful ways such as institutional purchasing. So that was kind of a quick high-level overview, and I wanted to be quick because what they have to talk about is much meatier and more interesting than this economic stuff. Ending on institutional purchasing and better health outcomes is the perfect opportunity to turn this over to Santana and talk about what he's doing with UC Davis Health.
Okay, all right. So one of the things that, with respect to healthcare, the hospital, UC Davis Medical Center Hospital, is one of the largest production kitchens in our city limits, and one of the larger ones in our region. And so one of the things that we've been able to do with experience in large capacity, whether it was from Golden One Center, even before that, Levi Stadium, large food purchasing. I come from sports, and before that was the hospitality industry with hotels. But what we've been able to realize is that we can support our local farmers and ranchers in a large way without demanding and telling them what the cost should be. So, not trying to dictate their pocket, if you will, and still compete with the commodity market. How we're doing that, or have learned to do that, is through, and other chefs as well, is forecasting. And forecasting out. And so an example of forecasting is something that I've been able to do with Next Generation Foods, and also to the right of me with Michael Passmore through Passmore Ranch. So with the fish that we're providing now in the hospital setting. So the goal is to get away from, the stigma of hospital food, gray food and Jell-O. All of us are well aware of that. Sorry, I guess I gotta be louder. Try to provide local, sustainable food that tastes great, looks great, and good food should be good medicine anyways. We're in a hospital setting. We're there to get better. So that has been much supported by the UC way. A lot of the presentations today have been very impressive with technology. One thing that I've heard through almost all of them was with healthcare, or partnership, or some kind of relationship with Healthcare Without Harm, which the entire UC system, all 19 properties, are participating in, along with their Cool Food Pledge. But to bring it back here, and Michael Passmore would be able to speak more to it on how our purchasing has been able to impact his business model as a local business owner and rancher farmer yourself. So on that, I could talk about what's been happening, but actually it's more important to hear straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. Or from the sturgeon's mouth, right? Sturgeon. I'll pass this over to Michael Passmore.
Thanks for having me, Board. My name is Michael Passmore. I'm the owner of Passmore Ranch, and Santana and I have known each other for quite some time, and recently, well, not so recently, I guess a year or so, began to do some business when he took over the UC Davis Health Center there. Succinctly, the difference that that relationship has made for us has been sustained regular buying with prompt payment. It's really quite simple. Typically, small businesses like ourselves don't align very well with large companies. I learned that a little bit 3-4 years ago or something. We were doing business with a very large organization, and we ended up kindly firing them just because we were not a fit. They wanted to, we were not aligned in our interests. They were not interested in paying us in a timely manner, and they were interested in driving prices down and not so concerned with quality. Our organization is not necessarily interested in the highest prices, but we do need to be profitable, which is that third leg of sustainability. And that's where UC Davis supports us a great deal. Any questions?
Centenna's working closely is, thank you, is with Next Generation Foods, Rusen Foreman. Michael Bosworth is also on the steering committee, on the Farm to Fork steering committee, and his partner Andrew is here to talk to you a little bit about how they're working in the local market, working with Santana.
Yeah, so my name is Andrew Brutlog. My last name's a little funny. Yeah, working with chef and food institutions in general. We also work with UC Davis and several other universities throughout Northern California. His forecasting allows us to set like a minimum for growing what we're going to grow. So what we do is we're growers, and then we have a distribution company because we couldn't get a large distributor such as Cisco or even a mid-size to even want to carry our product. So we created our own distribution company, and so we self-distribute to several of the institutions, UC Davis and Cal, several different universities. So yeah, when he tells us, I want to purchase from you, and he sets kind of a minimum floor for us that allows us to expand and possibly sell to other customers because he kind of tells us what he's looking for. As far as jasmine rice, we grow a lot of dry goods is what we kind of deal in. So they help us do that.
It's not all about what I want. It's about, so when it comes down to, say, this kitchen that we're in now, healthcare has an opportunity. There's an opportunity here. We are in America's, farm to fork capital. That's what we, the stake in the ground is, right? And so how better to, provide for that model or that statement, if you will, is in a hospital setting that actually has, it's known throughout our nation, through the children's hospital side of things. And not that I can speak for UC or all 19 properties, if you will. What I know that the mission is to, through the UCOP policy, is focus on local sustainable purchasing for our food programs, right? So when we average 6,500 meals a day as an average, and that's small in comparison to, say, 50,000 on school meals and things of that nature, we're in the business of healthcare, right? Getting people better. And so the models may be inadvertently, but hospitals maybe had, we all know, in that stigma of great food and Jell-O was all created, by, say, the nutritional values and the diet, right? So there's 44 plus diets that we have to adhere to in any hospital, right? And so in our case, and what we're doing now is really trying to focus on how can we, with a chef now, this position's new. I'm just over 12 months with UC now. And ultimately what it is we're able to now take that mission and that drive, talk to the local farmers, how can we get Next Gen to, since they are distributing and have these relationships with other farmers, speak with the produce providers like Produce Express that have a great connection with the community, get the food from UC Davis campus student farm to our hospital, right? Those are the things that we're trying to go outside of the box, keeping quality in mind, still adhering to the $2.72 budget that we're dealing with per meals too. That is very similar to schools. And just really, I'm just so impressed with the technology, the presentations we saw. I'm doing things manually still on a calculator and on my phone. That would make my life so much easier. And then also provide a way for these farmers and ranchers to forecast out for their future growth as Sacramento continues to grow and further support that business. So it's very important. Not what I want. I just want to support.
Yeah, to go on that really quick is we want to grow something that people want to eat too. That's the thing, right? I mean, we could grow whatever, California, we can grow a lot of different products here, but you have to grow something people want to eat at the end of the day. And the food institutions allow us to scale in economy with their kind of set that minimum floor so we can grow these products and have something for them, and be able to provide something from California, from an institutional standpoint.
I don't know how I got on this panel.
So we'll just skip you, okay, Nick?
Actually, I have it, Nick. I have it.
No. I can take a guess. I'm just joking. These guys do all the work. What we get to do at California Grown, as some of you may be familiar, is celebrate what it is to be farm to fork on a statewide basis. And our audience is intentionally the entire state of California. And so it's really interesting and inspiring to see where it's actually being executed on the local levels. We get to build pretty stories and pictures of food that is bountiful, plentiful, very gorgeous, tells a story on its own sometimes. We get to tell farmer stories on a weekly basis and really discover what impassions them to produce what all of these folks are using on a daily basis to make for nutritional support of children and Californians for that matter. So our gig is marketing, and I'm thankful that I'm in this position and I get to work for such a great organization, and that we have had support from our secretary to the degree that we have. We would not have been able to create a body of work for the last 4 years that I think has done a pretty respectable job telling the story of California agriculture without her and without Josh and many others, I'm sure, that I don't have privilege to access directly. That was also a joke. So I'm actually sad I didn't make the first part of the meeting, because it sounds like, and it looked like on the agenda, that you all talked about some really fantastic things happening in the world of tech and improving this system that sometimes gets oversimplified as planting something in the ground and delivering it to a grocery store or whatever outlet it might be. So for fear of taking up too much time without a whole lot of content, I'll just close my opening remarks, I suppose, there.
Question?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and open up this up for questions from any of the board members.
So the execution here, I think, is exceptional, and it's very real, because I think many of us in the beginning of we're going to be the farm to fork capital went, nice slogan, but is it real? So what is it? I have my own ideas from being, a resident of the area. What is it about this region that has taken this so far? What is it that's the support or the facilitation mechanism? Because you can have a lot of brilliant people who are passionate with great ideas, but there's got to be something to help give it some cohesiveness to develop real strategies that can be implemented.
Yeah, if other people want to answer this, they can as well. I would say, this is going to sound kind of oversimplified. There's so much passion for this in this region, and it is, I think, a combination of, and I hope we have this thing about wanting to be a big city here, but we are a big city. We're not as big as San Francisco or Los Angeles, and there is a component to Sacramento that's still a little bit small townish. And I think that's actually helped us in this way, because we are so much closer to our farms and to agriculture. And so that, combined with the fact that we have, for whatever reason, attracted just some amazing chefs that are not just good at their job of cooking, they are also social activists. And they have brought that with them, and just I think that's been a big drive behind the farm to fork movement, and why has helped here, has been here. And you know, there's other people involved too. We have a lot of people who are involved in education. We have great programs like the Food Literacy Center, excuse me, and others that are really passionate about this. But I think a lot of it is just our proximity to the agriculture, the fact that we are so close to it, and again, just these amazing chefs that we've been attracting. Why are we attracting such amazing chefs? You guys are awesome. What?
To answer Secretary, it's a responsibility. Why wouldn't a person that, and say in a position that I am in, you know, want to use the best quality product that's available? You know, when I go and I travel to Vermont, or I go to Florida, or I go anywhere in our, say, country, you're always going to find some kind of ag, you know, produce, vegetable, you know, fruit from California. So why wouldn't we want to support that if it's right here in our backyard? And I know that sounds cliche-ish, but at the same time, it doesn't always happen. We don't have to do that, right? But a lot of us chefs in town do. And that's another reason why, you know, I was sharing with Secretary, I was sharing with you at lunch, is like, that's why I stayed here and didn't go to Los Angeles. Why would I leave when I have the best produce and ag food to use and display in a dish, and in this case, work in healthcare, and maybe change that on a larger scale, which a lot of hospitals are still trying to do. And you know, but why wouldn't we feature the fish that Passmore Ranch has, right? So it's a responsibility, I think, is what a lot of us chefs here locally and nationally. But why we're using that?
So I guess this is a question to Nick, or a challenge. It seems from the farmers on our panel that this added component of institutional buying, because it allows you to scale up, is really perhaps a tipping point of making the economics make more sense. And I'm wondering what we could do what you could do in California. I feel ownership for everything. California Grown could do to help foster in more regions a stronger commitment to the institutional buying. You know, we passed a law a couple of years ago, which DGS is still working on the criteria. All things being equal, if it's within 5%, you know, institutions that are state-owned should buy California Grown. But is there something more creative? How do we build a broader network that has large-scale institutions, of which there are many in California, putting the same kind of emphasis on California grown purchasing?
Add on to that. What was really interesting and stood out to me today was Raja's presentation at the beginning for Rock Technologies in terms of blockchain. And in responding from a question from Dawn in terms of, you know, we have this information, we're giving it to you, you need to tell the story to make it profitable for the farmers, to elevate the farmers. You need to tell that story. And all of our presentations are doing some great work in terms of the institutional buying component. We're moving in that direction. We're seeing successes there, but we're still not seeing the sales potential, the elevation, the good success of telling the story from a farmer level to make the work that you're doing on the ground that sales motivator throughout the chain. So I was wondering, and going towards the Secretary's point, is the farm to fork movement, is that story the area where we capitalize and tell the farmer's story to make those issues profitable, or is it something else that we need to look at to tell that story?
Can I add on to that?
It is called a discussion.
It seems like it was 10 or 15 years ago, probably 10 years ago, we had a discussion on this very issue, and one of the big problems that the smaller growers had was distribution. And Andrew, you talked about starting a distribution company, and I just want to throw that into the mix in your answers of, is that helping? And Mike, I think you've been at it, and I think you were here before, and I think that was also one of your concerns. So if I can just add that on to the...
Right, and But really, I mean, that's years ago, that's what we had, were localized produce distribution centers that people took, and then they've essentially changed, and they don't really buy locally.
I think that's the supply question.
They're more of a large-scale distribution.
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer all of this, but I'll offer. I have all the answers. No. I will give one brief answer and then pass the microphone down. What you're saying that is part of what we want to do with Farm to Fork Live is exactly that, is tell the stories. We have a great marketing branding agency here in Sacramento that's created the Farm to Fork logo, that's working with us on Farm to Fork Live and the Honey Agency, and they're really good at that, at telling stories and getting that information out. And I am 100% in agreement on that is exactly what we need to do, is to get the farmer stories out there and make that connection for people. Because I think that it is changing. When I started working on this, however many years ago it was now, that was one of the biggest concerns, was the small farmer could not connect to the large-scale distribution system. And there are all of these innovative things that have been happening to help change that, to help make it different. Food hubs were a big part of the conversation for a while, starting local aggregation facilities. And those may still work. I personally think that we already have the institutions that we need who can do that kind of purchasing, and we would be better off working, I don't know if better off, a good way of doing it would be to be doing exactly what people like Santana are doing and going through those kinds of institutions to support local farmers.
I just have to intercept for a second so that I can contribute and earn my lunch. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm going to take a slightly different angle, because as far as California Grown goes, our focus is really getting people in retail to purchase more California, and that's even a challenge. And it is somewhat solved by way of forming a narrative that celebrates our farmers and gets people to recognize who they're supporting when they're buying their groceries. And that can consistently be done and should be done in order to keep California top of mind, and of course associated with a very strong brand, which I believe we have. So from that experience, there is definitely a storytelling component. What I have learned in speaking with retail, though, is that every environment is different, and the challenges they either perceive or that are real that I still haven't completely sorted out, and why they don't carry California pears all the way through California pear season. It's, that's a very nuanced thing that each system's going to have its own quirks, which I wish I could figure all of it out. But it seems that's why, from the supply side and figuring out, okay, what's actually possible, and then the narrative almost simultaneously lives with that problem-solving approach, but it's definitely close behind. I wouldn't put it in the front, personally speaking. We have a culture of retailers that I have seen over the years, and speaking with them and building relationships, that are wanting to source and promote local. I'd like to claim all the credit for that, but I can't. They've gotten there because people have told them we want more local things. We want a more local supply of food in our stores. And we were in the right place at the right time, so to speak, and ready to deliver content and flow with that changing culture. So, I might have made it even more cloudy, but it's definitely a moving target. I don't know the question how to get more institutions. The answer to that question, to purchase more California products, that's a whole nother beast.
I think institutions will serve what people want, and that goes to the farm to fork messaging. Farm to fork, early on, obviously, chefs have been doing that forever. They desire real high-quality products. The farm to fork capital has just figured out a way to tell that story effectively, and folks have latched on to that because it's an attractive story. When we deal with another one of our institutional buyers in aggregate is Bon Appetit Management Company. That is a central message and a sales point for them to their clients. They serve education, they serve corporate facilities such as Yahoo and SAP and all these tech companies, and that is a point that their employees, they want that. It provides value. So I think that speaks to the point of what do we do? We keep telling a story that the consumer, the diner, demands that. They want that. It's important to them. And so these companies who wish to provide value or to employ these folks, they will in turn provide those quality products to provide value to their employees as well. When we talk about, I made a few notes here, you talk about why the Farm to Fork and our Farm to Fork Capital message resonates with folks, and it's because the underpinnings are authentic. And why they are authentic is that we do have quality chefs, we have quality farmers, the access is real, and my company serves chefs all over the country. Our main business is serving chef-driven restaurants, James Beard Award winners, Michelin Star awardees, all of those type of folks. And when they look at California as a state, particularly Sacramento, they are always awestruck by our access to products and ingredients. Every once in a while, I suppose we have to look out way far away for some, we're not doing so well on the truffle front right now, but in general, anything they want is right here. And so when you have an authentic story, that makes it really easy to tell and for people to resonate with. I believe one of the other questions is why is our region attracting so much quality chef talent? And one of the key aspects there, again, is ingredients, but you also have factors that Sacramento has a unique community, and it is affordable or relatively affordable, perhaps nationwide, maybe not as affordable as Topeka, Kansas or something, but relatively here in Sacramento, it is affordable. We do attract chefs from other major culinary stops because they can afford to develop a restaurant here. There is a willing dining public, more and more from that Farm to Fork story, that are getting more and more interested in that, and they can afford to live here. That's very attractive for them. And thanks to the folks that are marketing it, they're getting the appropriate coverage that keeps bringing more butts to seats, that pays their bills, and that keeps the ball rolling there.
Well, that was interesting. I'm a retailer. And my observation is the public, as you know, is pretty fickle. And I would say that the peak of interest in the local farm, dinner on the farm kind of culture has peaked. And people are in a different conversation now. And I would say that one of the most important values that we need to be emphasizing now is food security, so people can get the food that they want. And that's something, of course, California has been providing. The nutritional value, so people are willing to actually pay more if they feel like they're getting a better health benefit. And preserving in local agriculture the unbuilt environment. So I'm in San Diego, and we see traffic that rivals LA. We see more density. We see the loss of many of those attributes in San Diego that made it a desirable place to live. And people are now starting to value more the fact that agriculture is a preserve, if you will, between us and Los Angeles, for example, and gives you a rest from the intensity of modern living these days. So I'm just saying that the story used to be, and for the chefs, I appreciate, the exotic ingredients and the fun it is to really present a beautiful plate. But I'm thinking that what I'm noticing in the business side is that people are looking for a little more security, food security. Is it going to be on the shelf? And is it going to nurture and feed and provide the nutrition that I'm looking for, coupled with building in the community the economic multiplier that makes each community successful. So agriculture is a base for the guy that fixes your shoes and the local hairdresser and all the rest of it. And I don't think we've done as good a job as we could be doing in California to show that agriculture is the linchpin for the economic success of a lot of our communities, and not just rural, but urban communities. So that's my observation.
I concur with a lot of what you said, except for that, that the farm to fork message has peaked. I don't see that nationwide. In fact, I see it continuing on an upward trend nationwide as it falls down to lower and lower levels. Lower not being a bad thing, but as one of my chefs explained to me a long time ago, was that the fashions you see on a Paris runway may seem inaccessible on a Paris runway, but then many, many years later, you may not see that same coat, but you'll see the same styles, the same colors and otherwise down at Mervyn's or your discount store. And so, and that's when the real acceptance happens and the broadening of that product. I see the same thing in farm to fork. An example, there's a restaurant that just opened in Chicago called Pacific Standard Time, and it celebrates California and our bounty. And they specifically reached out to us to purchase that. That tells me, and I continue to see in my travels, that the farm to fork message continues to grow, not just in our area. We can be a little bit jaded by it because we're so used to it. But otherwise, I completely resonate with the rest of your message there. I think it's important.
Well, the question from the Secretary was how to get to more institutional buying. And so I wonder what your outreach program is, and that perhaps what we need to do is extend eco-literacy to adult education in a way, so that we're bringing that story to the people in a position to change their ways or improve their ways.
So one of the things that we kind of have learned over the time is that there's two components to making an institutional purchasing program work. One is the purchaser and the other is the farmer, because a lot of farmers don't know how to work with institutional purchasers, as well as institutional purchasers don't know how to make the programs work working with local farmers instead of like a large company. And I think that in my experience working with farmers on different matters, different kinds of things, the best way for farmers to learn is from other farmers. Farmer to farmer teaching, I think, works better than the rest of us walking in and trying to tell them what to do, because that doesn't work. So one of the things that we've talked about doing, especially after the success of the October event we had that was focused on institutional purchasing, is how do we set up programs like that? How do we set up trainings, maybe once or twice a year, just for farmers and purchasers in our region to learn from people, like Santana, like Michael, like Andrew, who are doing this and making it work. And maybe it is bringing somebody from the Center for Eco-Literacy in as well and talking to the schools. Obviously, when you get into schools, you get into a whole different thing because of regulations. And especially here in Sacramento, our districts get audited a lot more than others just because they're in Sacramento. So they have to, it's true. And I'm sure hospitals face their own set of regulations as well. But I think that that's the kind of programming that will help expand things like institutional purchasing. The other thing I did just want to say about the food security comment was that I completely agree, and especially when you have things like romaine scare, which affects so many people, because that's just in everything. It's in our sandwiches, it's in everything. The first reaction from a lot of people was know your farmer. because people that purchase go to the farmer's market, or they know that their institutional purchaser is purchasing from local farmers, they know exactly where it came from. And so they know that lettuce is safe. So that's part of the marketing, I think, as well, is that part of those stories.
There's a certain level of empathy that could be gained from that too on the romaine deal. I mean, you have to understand that the farmer is doing everything they can to make sure it's a safe product. But if you have this notion of a farmer's commitment to producing something safe, I think that has tremendous value. And you can never tell that story enough.
Very good. Just want to thank all of you for coming in this afternoon and sharing your story with us. Great story, really. You guys have done a really good job here in Sacramento. I wish we could emulate it in other areas. There's a lot of places it'll fit. So, thank you again. All right, our next item, board discussion, recommendations from our meetings today. Anybody have any suggestions or anything they'd like to put forward?
I just have a reminder for the board that our next meeting is in February 5th. We will not be having a meeting in January, just general announcement.
And our February meeting will be here, or we don't know yet?
We will be here. Most likely it'll be here, yes.
All right, okay. Joy?
I'd just like to give you all a brief update on where we are on broadband, since that has become my middle name. I have a sash, Miss Broadband. So last week or so, I had the pleasure, thanks to Karen organizing it, of speaking to the State Broadband Council. And as a result of that, I think we got two really good, we made our position known that, number one, the council, as part of its 2019 goals, is going to go back to the legislature to ask for an additional member be added to the council to represent CDFA. Wow. So I think that is just like a major step forward. I'm going to get caught up in my wait until you hear, and you're going to just say, oh, well, there we have it. Okay, but the second thing that I was really happy with is that I got to give a presentation on ag tech and the transformative value of ag tech and the need for connectivity in order to have that, and that the future of California agriculture absolutely hinges on our ability to engage in the 21st century. And the first big step towards that is getting farm fields onto the CPUC broadband maps. And so that was my number one wish list, and that is now on the public record and is in the capable, wonderful hands of Commissioner Martha Guzman Aceves. So I feel really great about that. On a third front, through sheer serendipity, I had the great opportunity to meet the brand new CEO of Verizon, and stealing the moment, I waltzed up and said, I have a problem you can fix. And so I'm now on my fourth phone call with Verizon. I'm now talking to two directors here in California, and I've got them directed towards lighting up the fairgrounds. And this is where you've caught me, is that the model is in Sonoma. I know, no one is going to believe me, but that is because OES had that at the top of their list. I just want to say it was not my choosing, for the record. Don did a fantastic job of speaking to the legislative director for Ana Caballero, and jawboned him into confirming that high on her list will be introducing legislation on broadband. And I'm going on Monday to San Francisco for a CPUC hearing to meet the Sprint T-Mobile people. So that's it.
So Joy, thank you, really. I mean, we've got some, even if it isn't Sonoma, that's okay. That's a start. But, no, really, we have some really great people on our board that are just do fantastic things. I mean, this started with a meeting we had here and took off, and you've really taken off with it. I'm really proud of what
Well,
our
I
board
have to
can
say,
do.
Josh's meeting that he put together was a symposium. It was absolutely, it is the briefing video for anybody who's interested in broadband.
Yeah, we talk about food deserts. We have a broadband desert in agriculture. I mean, it's horrible. And that's been my pet peeve for a long time. So thank you. You fix it. You take care of it for us. But thank you, really appreciate it.
World peace, you're on your own.
So thank you again. We'll go ahead and open it up for public comments at this time. Anyone? Step forward, your name and.
Y'all come up. My name is Michael Harris. Y'all know me. For the record, Black Farmers Ag Association, forever. And as I shared a couple months ago, we have the Pan-Africa Global Trade and Investment Conference. We're going all the way to Africa for the farm, and the fork is going to be here but we're also growing local. So this is Queen Sheba Restaurant Local, Reverend Tollison. Y'all might remember him. So we have Africa right here, and 20 years, 30 years. I'm 50 years African, just born here, still African. The idea is, in the Farm to Fork folks, we want to have the taste, the culinary excellence of the African cuisine as part of the Farm to Fork, grown locally. So I'll be quiet.
Hi, how are you guys? So I'm the owner of Queen Sheba Restaurant. I don't know who's been there before. Anybody has been to? Yes. So what my main thing is at Queen Sheba Restaurant is provide vegan food for the vegan and vegetarian customers, of course, but they bring the meat eaters too, so that works out for everybody. So I've been there for over 15 years now, 13 years at the Broadway location on Broadway, 1704 Broadway, and then 2 years on Howe location. So from my side, I grew up, of course, in Ethiopia, eating all vegetables all the time. So most of our diet is 80% of our diet is vegan. Like meat dishes is sometimes, when we have celebration or something. So my whole idea is that the problem, California is a good place because a lot of people are becoming vegetarian and vegan, very conscious on what they eat, what they don't eat. So my idea came into, because I have a lot of vegan customers, we cook a lot of vegetarian dishes. That's why we have like Monday to Friday, we have all vegan buffet. So we have like cabbage dish, greens, potato and carrots, yellow split peas for the kids. They love it, even the kids. So the problem is like, how do we show them, the parents, how to cook the vegan food or the vegetarian food that would taste really good using garlic and ginger, spices, herbs that already can be grown in California. So I team up with Tellison. He's a farmer. He's been here for a long, long time farming. He's a organic farmers too. So, and then Michael and other of us, we got a land in Vacaville, which is around 156 acres. So we got to work on that. So the whole point is to create a culture there. The place is like perfect, around Vacaville area. It's to grow the vegetable there. Also create a culture where people like me, I'm a chef. So I know how to show them how to cook cabbage dishes, like in 10 minutes, the best cabbage dish. With cooking with turmeric, garlic and ginger, chopped onion. It takes only 10 minutes, but people don't know how to cook it. So what we're trying to do is grow the food, the vegetable there, and they create a culture where people can come with the kids or family, then we can show them how to cook. Just get the cabbage from or the greens and the spinach, and then just cook it and show them how to do it. And that way, when they go home, they can actually, it would take them, even for the side, it would take them only 5-10 minutes to make a good, tasty vegetable dishes. But the problem I see here is like all the veggie dishes are like steamed, or just put some pepper or some salt. And my kids are not eating it, honestly. So that culture I want to bring to here to California because, and then I'm working with a lot of people, with the church and with the community leaders, trying to make everybody vegetarian and vegan if we can. And especially in Sacramento, yeah. So I had a huge last Sunday. They invited me to bring all my veggie dishes at the church midtown. So they were lining up to eat it. Most of them, they never tasted veggie dishes like that. Honestly, you guys gonna have to come there and try it. And you will say, we want this for our kids. Yeah, some vegetarian kids that will say, where do you want to go? I want to go to Queen Sheba. Honestly, there was a girl, 5-year-old girl last year. She was a cancer patient, and she's vegetarian. As soon as they let her know to eat food, she wanted to come to Queen Sheba. So that is the kind of thing we want to create. So my whole idea in the future is to have not a fast food like with chicken or beef, vegan fast food, vegetarian fast food that would taste really good. So now we have a land with of Tellison. He's expert on growing farm. So we're trying to create that culture around it so people come and celebrate. Not just, it's just vegetable broccoli and you have to force that into them. So that is what I can say, but I'm so excited about creating that culture around it. Even have some music, have like festival, like, the wine that they do it at the wine festival by Oakland. You can go there and drink wine, Napa, yes. Yes. So, but we can do the same thing for agriculture, like food, like growing food. So they can see it actually is grown. Even the other idea we have is honestly work with the school district so they can get the bus maybe once a week, bring the kids, show them how to cook. It's also good for their mental health, their physical health, and have bus come bring them there with their family or with the teachers. And so they can experience, they can see, so they grow up seeing that, especially our people like African Americans, even, Black people. So bring them so they can start eating healthy food. That is, I think, what my idea is. But I'll let Tellison explain about the farming.
And thank you very much. Thank you. It is my pleasure, and I always appreciate the work you do. In brief, because you have seen me before here, but now we have a land, 156 acre in Vacaville, and as you know, AB 1348 describes that the Black have a hard time to access resource, and basically it comes down to that. We wondering how we can have maybe a technical assistant person, someone here, because we don't know where to identify the resource that we're supposed to tap into. We don't know who to talk with, about, some money, grant, loan, and this and that. We have the land now. We got to put it in production. So if you go back to AB 1348, you see, it kind of explains that. If you go back to my presentation to how we, as a socially disadvantaged minority Black, see that AB 1348, that where to get started from is that to have a land and have young people come in there and get training on that land and then produce more food. And now they have the skills. They will be motivated now to get a job, to create their own farming operation. So it has to start from somewhere. So we come before the board, maybe we will do a letter to your, who to address to. So we have 156 acres, and we need your help with that, in short.
And I also wanted to talk about the other grain called teff. It's called, they wrote about it on New York Times. It's called super grain teff. If we can get a hold of it in California, honestly, that's the future grain. It's all gluten-free. It also has a high protein, calcium, mineral, iron, everything you need. Like at the restaurant, most people who are allergic to gluten, they always order that gluten-free injera, the bread. So I see the high demand of it, which we don't have it here in America. So what we're trying to do, maybe have a little bit, 1 or 2 acre, experiment on it, see if we can grow it in California. It's actually the only gluten-free grain. So I think it has high demand. Now they grow it in Idaho, so you have to order like 6 months in advance to get that grain in Idaho right now at this moment. So why not in California, especially we have the perfect weather. The weather like here is just like Ethiopia. That grain grew only in Ethiopia for the past thousands of years. But now, European is trying to get a hold of it. Even here, they're growing it in Idaho. I think California would be the perfect weather, just like we have it like Ethiopia. I think we should think about that too.
So,
growing teff. It's called super grain.
Yeah, but we're going to start losing people. So I wanted to make sure that, Mr. Tellison, you know that we have hired our new farm equity advisor. She is on maternity leave. She had a beautiful little girl in November. But Thea Rittenhouse did start here 3 months ago, and she's starting to put together all of the programs that might be available across state government, but quite frankly, most of the programs are USDA programs. But she will be working with our public affairs staff to make all of that easily available and very transparent. So that will be one of her first things when she gets back. She was here for about a month and a half and able to start that kind of research. But the USDA, obviously with the Farm Services Agency as well as NRCS, has great technical assistance and micro business loans that I know for many small farmers have really been extremely helpful in starting up farming organizations. Right here, not to single out my institutions, but one does have a connection to cooperative extension, which is the best technical assistance possible. But Cal Poly Dean is here in addition to the UC Davis Dean. For the future, this year's concept papers have already been due, but do consider applications to the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. And I also think it would be valuable to really think about reaching out to ALBA, which is headquartered in Monterey County, because they have done a lot of the work that you aspire to do as far as teaching people how to grow in smaller acres so they can go out and grow and have their own farms. And I know a lot of great Latino farmers have come out of the ALBA program in Monterey.
Or FarmLink.
And then FarmLink, I talked earlier to their folks, and they've already made that connection, but FarmLink as far as the lending program, just to get that land base, or sometimes bridge loans. So I think there's a whole menu here, but really when Thea gets back, she'll be spending all of her time on providing this kind of information and helping people identify resources. We want to be able to do that.
Do you have any questions for me? But I have to tell you,
Thank you very much.
every day I get veggie delivered, all my cabbage, my greens, they can't even get enough of it. So you gotta have to come and try it for yourself. See what I'm talking about when I say Queen Sheba, we have the best vegan and vegetarian food, and we want that for everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, if we have no other business, our meeting is adjourned, and yeah, have a great Christmas and holiday. Thank you again, Karen.
I just want to say, just to the board here, well, anybody, it's not a secret, but for you, Karen, the best is yet to come. There is just no doubt about it. And you have quite the support team here behind you. And we'll see you in February, no problem.
We'll see you in February.
Yes.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to say, I'm Derek Cassidy from San Diego, and as your longest-serving, self-appointed audience member, more than 5 years, more than 60 meetings, and I know that I am the longest-serving because I have been watching the audience carefully over that period of time. But I do want to say that this meeting today in December at the end of 2018 brings to a close the 87th year of the California Food and Agriculture Board. And it also brings to a close 2 terms of service of 2 remarkable public servants. One is our Secretary of Agriculture, Karen Ross, and the other is our governor, under whose pleasure all of you serve. Governor Brown, I sat there last night looking at him and thinking, it's amazing what he has accomplished. For most men or women, 8 years in the governor's chair of California would be enough. They would leave with their public opinion ratings down and, you know, come in high, leave at the bottom, and glad to get out. But Jerry Brown asked for another go-around, bringing to 16 years the number of years he has governed the largest state in the nation, an economy that is bigger than many countries. I think they say fifth largest economy. And brought it back into the black with a rainy day fund that was nowhere near there when he started. And I just have to admire, I know he's not perfect. I know I have friends who, you know, are critical of him and all that. And, but overall, I don't think there's been a governor in the history of our country who's achieved a more admirable record. And as for our Secretary of Agriculture, the second woman in the history of our state, 87 years ago it began, the second woman in the history of our state and the longest serving in the Secretary of Agriculture job. If you go in there and look at those pictures, some of those men only served 6 months. I believe one man served a month. I must have been a misprint on his picture. It said he took over in January of a year and he ended in January of a year. So we have to take our hats off to our secretary, but as she is the first to say, she doesn't do it alone. And that brings up our executive director, Josh Eddy, and the president of our board, Don Cameron. So anyway, it's been a real pleasure observing you all for these 6 years, and I've learned a lot. And I've learned a lot. I almost feel like I'm a farmer. And I feel like I can talk knowledgeably about agriculture. I mean, really. And it makes me, I really have a hunger for more Californians to be in these board meetings and see what you all do and hear the people who come before you and learn what you learn and then act the way you act. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. On that note, really have a wonderful holiday.